Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. I know many of you choose these videos to relax and easily drift off to sleep. Before you slip into your dreams, could you do me a small favor? Leave a quick interaction and let us know where you're watching this and at what time. Now, let's begin tonight's horror stories. I'm Isaac, 26 years old, living in Kentucky. Every weekend, I drive my green van to go camping with Rex, the dog I've had for 3 years. We've been to many places. Rex always sits in the passenger seat, his bright eyes gazing out the window. It was a weekend in June as I was preparing to head to Daniel Boone National Forest in the Appalachian Mountains. Rex jumped into the van, wagging his tail nonstop as he saw me load the sleeping bags and tent into the back. The weather forecast predicted rain, but I didn't want to cancel the plan. The further I drove into the mountains, the darker the sky got. Black clouds swirled around the mountain peaks, and the wind shook the trees. We arrived at the spot at 3 p.m., but it already felt like 6 p.m. because the sky was so dark. Rex began to get restless, unable to sit still. I was looking for a place to set up the tent when I spotted an open area by the side of the road. It was ideal, flat and shaded by trees. As soon as I turned off the engine, Rex started barking loudly. I looked out and saw a man sitting about 10 meters away, his back turned to us. Around him were scattered camping supplies, a backpack, sleeping bag, and a gas stove. I opened the van door and waved. "Sorry, I didn't know someone was here. I'll find another spot." The man didn't respond. He remained seated, his back slightly hunched, staring at the ground. Rex barked louder, trying to rush toward the man. I had to hold him back. "It's okay, Rex. We'll go somewhere else." I drove off, but Rex kept looking back, barking until the van turned onto a different road. I'd never seen him react like that to a stranger. After driving another 2 miles, I found another spot near a creek. The rain started pouring heavily as I finished setting up the tent. Rex ran into the tent first, shivering and refusing to come out. That night, it rained heavily. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to the rain pounding on the tent and the sound of the creek flowing. Rex lay next to me, but he kept getting up, his ears standing tall, growling softly. I petted his head and whispered, "Is the rain too much for you, Rex?" But I couldn't sleep either. The rain was intense, and thunder cracked every few minutes, shaking the ground. The next morning, the rain stopped, but the sky remained cloudy. Rex wasn't his usual cheerful self. He didn't run around, didn't sniff the flowers. He stayed close to me, continuously looking toward the forest. We had sandwiches and coffee for breakfast, cooked on a gas stove. I took a few scenic photos, but Rex refused to pose as he usually does. "All right, Rex, let's head home early today." I packed up our stuff and put Rex in the van. As I was driving back toward the main road, Rex suddenly barked loudly. The next moment, a large black bear ran across the road. I slammed on the brakes, and the van skidded on the wet road, coming to a stop just off the side of the road. My heart was pounding. The bear ran into the forest and disappeared. I sat there for a moment to calm down, then realized we were stopped right at the spot where I'd seen the man yesterday. He was still sitting there. I looked more closely. He was sitting just like yesterday, back hunched, head bowed, his hands resting on his thighs. His camping gear was still scattered around him. This was strange. It had rained heavily last night. Why didn't he set up his tent and just sit there? I turned off the engine and opened the van door. Rex jumped down but didn't run around like usual. He stayed close to me, fur bristling, eyes locked on the man. I kept the leash tight. "Hey, are you all right?" There was no answer. His clothes were soaked. Raindrops gathered on his hair and fell to the ground in a steady rhythm. I took a step closer. Rex growled softly, his legs stiff. "Do you need help? Have you been sitting here all night?" Still no response. I noticed his breathing was shallow, his chest barely rising. Was I seeing things? It was hard to see clearly from this distance. I took another step closer. Rex stepped back, the leash pulling tight. I was now only about 4 meters away from him. A strange smell lingered in the air. "Are you having some kind of problem?" I raised my voice slightly. He still didn't react. I took another step forward. The smell became stronger, foul and decayed. "Are you okay?" I reached my hand out, ready to touch his shoulder. When my arm was only half a meter from him, I saw more clearly. There was something on the ground around where he was sitting. Brownish red stains, some dry, others still fresh. I stopped. My heart started racing. "Hey!" I touched his shoulder. It was stiff and cold. I pulled my hand back immediately. Rex barked sharply, almost like a warning. I slowly moved around to the front of the man. Then I saw something horrifying. His chest and stomach were ripped open. The gashes were uneven, as though they had been torn apart with claws. Through the rips, I could see his flesh inside. Part of his chest had been torn out, leaving a deep, dark red cavity. The ribs were exposed, white and jagged. His stomach was also ripped open, part of his intestines missing. I clutched my stomach, feeling nauseous. The stench was unbearable now. The smell of blood, rotting flesh, death. Suddenly, his body tilted to the side, maybe because I had touched him and disturbed his balance. He fell to the left, his head hitting the ground with a small thud. Now I could see his face clearly. His eyes were clouded, no longer reflecting light. His face was pale, with signs of decomposition in some areas. I stepped back, shaking uncontrollably. Rex barked incessantly, trying to pull me away from there. I remembered the bear running across the road earlier. It must have found the body and eaten part of it. I quickly grabbed Rex and ran back to the van, nearly tripping. I started the engine and drove off as fast as I could, not daring to look back. Once I reached the residential area, I stopped at a gas station and called 911 with my hands still trembling. After the police investigation, I learned the man's name was Michael Thompson, 42, from Seattle. He had died from sudden cardiac arrest on Thursday afternoon, before Rex and I arrived. His body had indeed been affected by a black bear. I will never forget the scene that day, and I'll never go camping alone again. I'm Nicole, 26, and I love life on the road. I converted an old Ford Transit van into a fully equipped mobile home. I came to the mountains of Montana in early winter. That night was December 17th, and the temperature dropped lower than expected. Even in the wilderness, I'd never felt lonely or scared until that night. I fell into a deep sleep, curled up in my thick sleeping bag, feeling safe in my little van. I jolted awake. My phone showed 4:27 a.m. Maybe it was just a tree branch blown against the van by the wind. The sound came again, and it wasn't a branch. My mind told me it might just be a hiker needing help, but no one hikes at 4 a.m. in such heavy snow. I reached for my phone, trembling as I turned on the video recording app. "I know you're in there. I've been watching you." A deep male voice echoed. My throat tightened. I tried to keep my phone steady. "I don't know you. What do you want?" I crawled towards the driver's seat, careful not to make a sound. Through the windshield, I saw a car parked far away, its headlights blazing. "I like the color of the underwear you're wearing." He sounded amused. My heart stopped. How long had he been watching me? "I've called the police. They're on their way." A raspy laugh replied. "There's no cell service here, Lisa. You checked when you arrived, remember? You even complained about it. A pretty car like this must have a lot of doors. I wonder if you've locked them all." I swallowed hard. The passenger window. It wasn't secure, and I hadn't had time to fix it. My survival instinct kicked in. I lunged for the driver's seat. The keys were already in the ignition. The engine roared to life in the dark. The van lurched forward, almost sliding off the unpaved road. In the rearview mirror, I saw the black car also start to move. its headlights aimed directly at my van. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, speed rocketing to 55 miles per hour on the slippery forest road. The snow fell heavier, visibility reduced to just a few feet in front of me. The other car closed in, less than 15 feet from my tail. I could see the outlines of two men behind the wheel. The road suddenly curved. Instead of slowing down, I tightened my grip on the wheel and took a risk. I knew a small path that continued along the hillside. As I reached the bend, I suddenly pulled the handbrake, sharply turned the wheel, and swerved the van onto the narrow path to the right. The van tilted but held on. The car behind couldn't react in time to the maneuver. It sped straight down the main road, tires screeching in the dark as they realized they'd lost me. I turned off my lights, letting the van slowly coast down the path. After a few minutes, I stopped beside a large rock, hiding the van from the main road. The receding engine sound indicated they had gone in the other direction. All night, I sat leaning against the door, my heart rate unable to return to normal. As soon as dawn broke, I drove to the nearest town's police station. I reported everything. The officer listened, his expression growing more concerned. "I need to tell you something." The officer sighed. "This isn't the first report we've received. In the past 6 months, 3 other women have reported similar experiences when alone at night. What happened to them? 2 of them disappeared 2 weeks later. The 3rd was found, but I don't want to go into detail. So, there's a predator targeting women? Not one. I think they operate as a group." I returned to my van. The sense of safety it once provided was completely gone. I decided to drive home to my parents in Ohio and sell the van. On the way, I stopped in a small town to stay overnight at a hotel. As I walked into the hotel room and locked the door, the images of that terrifying experience kept replaying in my mind. I opened my phone to rewatch the video I had recorded. Maybe I would see something I had missed. With trembling hands, I opened the video file. The screen was pitch black, but the audio was clearly recorded. "Lisa." I replayed that part. The man had called me Lisa, but my name is Nicole. I quickly opened my Instagram app, searching for the name Lisa, along with the keywords van life and Montana. After a few minutes of scrolling, my heart nearly stopped. A young woman named Lisa Wilson, with reddish-brown hair like mine, also lived in a van and had come to Montana 2 months ago. As I looked deeper into her pictures, I noticed many astonishing similarities. Not just the hair color, but also her hairstyle, clothing style, and even how she decorated her van. I scrolled down to Lisa's older posts. She bought her van from the same dealership in Seattle where I bought mine. The Ford Transit model is very popular in the van life community, and metallic silver paint is also a common choice. I scrolled further and discovered that Lisa had worked for the same travel magazine I had contributed to. I believed that if anyone followed both of us on social media, they could easily mistake us for each other. I rushed to my camera bag and pulled out an old memory card I hadn't deleted. There was a photo of a sunrise near the campground, and in the distance, I saw a Ford Transit van identical to mine. My hands trembled as I realized the truth. They mistook me for Lisa. Immediately, I called the police officer who took my report. The police asked me to bring the van to the station for a thorough inspection. My Ford Transit wasn't Lisa's van, but they were almost identical. More importantly, through GPS and gas station data, the police discovered that both Lisa and I had traveled similar routes within the past 2 months. 2 weeks later, I heard that the FBI had arrested 4 suspects at a secluded farm more than 60 miles from me. They found evidence linking them to at least 7 other disappearances in Montana and other states. This network had been operating for years, targeting people living on the road because they had less social contact. Lisa Wilson was not found alive. 6 months later, I'm still trying to rebuild my life in a small apartment in Columbus. I no longer live on the road, but I've never given up on my dream of freedom and exploration. Instead, I'm writing a book about women's safety In my photography notebook, I still keep a picture of Lisa, the stranger whose life became intertwined with mine by chance. My name's Alex. Josh and Tyler, they've been best buds since college. The three of us are pretty outdoorsy. We love getting out in nature. Every now and then, we ditch the city for quick 2-day camping trips out in the woods. Last time, we headed out on a Saturday morning in July, each with a backpack loaded with gear. The plan? Hit 2 different campsites, one night at each. The first spot was about 2 miles off the main trail, tucked near a little stream. We made it there around 3 p.m. I dropped my pack and took a look around. Josh was already pulling his tent out, and Tyler was off gathering dry wood for the fire. "This place is perfect," Josh said while setting up. I nodded and started unpacking my stuff. The sun was already dipping low, and Tyler was stacking up kindling for a small fire. We kicked back, grilled some sausages, cracked open a few beers, and just let the stress from the week fade away. Then, around 8, something rustled in the bushes behind us. We all turned. Some guy stepped out. Gray, messy hair, unshaven beard. Looked like he hadn't seen a shower in a while. "Hey guys," he said. "Saw your fire and thought I'd come over." Josh glanced at me, then at Tyler. None of us said anything, but yeah. The vibe got weird fast. I asked, "Hey, you camping out here too?" The guy gave us this weird little smile. "You could say that. I've been out here a long time." He just stood there, eyes locked on the fire. That's when I noticed. His hands were shaking. "You okay?" "You look cold," Tyler asked. "Cold? Nah, I'm not cold anymore." That sent a chill down my spine. Josh got up real casual-like, said he was going to grab more firewood. "Mind if I stay here with you?" We all froze. No one said a word. A few seconds passed, but it felt way longer. And then he started humming. Some weird, wordless tune made my skin crawl. It wasn't like a song, more like a low moan, like someone hurting but trying to hold it in. Josh tried to play it cool. Yeah, well, we were just about to hit the sack. Gotta be up early tomorrow." The guy stopped humming, slowly turned his head toward Josh. "I'm always here, even when you think I'm not." Then, he just turned around and walked straight into the dark. Gone. We sat there for a few minutes, dead quiet. "What the hell was that?" Tyler whispered. "Maybe he's just lost," Josh muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. We put the fire out and got in the tent way earlier than planned. I was lying in my sleeping bag, wide awake, listening to every damn sound outside. Eventually, I must have passed out. Next morning, we packed up and made our way to the second campsite. On the way, we swung by the ranger station to grab some water and snacks. While Josh and Tyler were inside picking out food, I stepped out for a smoke. A big old bulletin board covered in missing person flyers. Most of them were sun-bleached and curling at the corners, but one stood out. The face on it made my stomach drop. Thomas Gray, 58, missing since last September. May have mental health issues, last seen in this area. It was him, the guy from last night, no doubt in my mind. I called Josh and Tyler out. As soon as they saw the flyer, the color drained from their faces. We called the number on the flyer. Cops said they'd send someone out to check the area. Thanked us for the heads up. They told us to be careful, report back if we saw him again. Josh looked at me. "Should we just head home?" I shook my head. "I mean, yeah, he's got issues, but he didn't seem dangerous." So we kept going. The second campsite was a good 5 miles out, way more remote, pretty much off the grid. We pitched our tent by this small lake. The afternoon went by like any other. We fished a bit, cooked some dinner, played cards, just hanging out. But once the sun went down, the vibe shifted. Around midnight, I jolted awake. That humming sound was back. Same weird tune from the night before, except this time, it was clearer, closer. It echoed all around our tent, like it was circling us. Josh sat up and grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" Tyler was awake too. We just laid there listening. The humming would stop, then start up again. "It's him," I whispered. "How the hell does he know where we are?" "Beats me!" I reached for my phone to call the cops. No signal. That creepy hum kept going all night. None of us slept a wink. By morning, we were done. No way we were staying another minute. As we packed up, I noticed something. Footprints, all around our tent. We didn't waste any more time, just grabbed our stuff and hit the trail back to the car. We were about a mile out when we heard it, a loud shout from behind us. "Alex, Josh, Tyler." It was his voice, clear as day, calling each of us by name. We stopped dead in our tracks, turned around, and there he was. He was waving at us like we were old friends. Huge grin on his face, like he was thrilled to see us. We ran, full sprint, no looking back, until we spotted the car, dove in, and fired up the engine. Josh gunned it down the mountain like a bat out of hell. How the hell did he know our names?" Tyler asked, still catching his breath. No one answered. When we got home, we called the cops again and told them everything. About a week later, they found Thomas, but not alive. They found pieces of him in a deep cave. The medical examiner said he'd been dead for several days. Could have been the weather, could have been animals, or maybe something got to him before all that. We never went camping again after that. Sometimes Josh brings it up, says maybe we were just freaked out, tired, paranoid. Maybe we imagined stuff. But me? That one question still keeps me up at night. How the hell did he know our names?
I'm Natalie, living in Queens, New York. I've been orphaned since childhood, living with my grandmother and aunt. They're the only family I've known. Since elementary school, I've been close friends with Laura, who lives just a block away from me. Laura has a similar background to mine. Her father abandoned her and her mother when Laura was 4. By the time she was 10, her mother left Laura with her grandparents and remarried. Laura and I grew up together, considering each other as sisters. I have a strong personality, while Laura is very feminine. Both of us lacking affection. We deeply cherish and support each other. When we went to college, Laura and I decided to attend the same university. By sophomore year, Laura met a guy named Kane. Kane is 2 years older than us, with a somewhat eccentric appearance. He's tall and very skinny. His pale and white skin made him look frail and delicate. His brown hair always hung long and somewhat disheveled. Kane had multiple piercings on his ears, nose, lips, chin, and eyebrows. Living alone, he never mentioned or met any of his relatives. Kane and Laura quickly fell in love after just 1 month of knowing each other. When Laura told me she had accepted Kane's confession of love, I was genuinely surprised and somewhat disappointed. I didn't like Kane. For some reason, I just didn't feel fond of him. Many times I caught his eerie and intimidating gaze towards Laura, but I had no right to interfere in her personal life. Laura's grandmother also advised her several times to be careful and vigilant with Kane. After 3 months of dating, Laura and Kane announced their engagement, shocking everyone. Laura was so deeply in love with Kane that she brushed off the warnings. They moved to the house Kane had rented previously in the neighboring town after getting married. Laura missed out on her studies, choosing to stay home and do household chores. At first, she would often come back to visit. We went out together, and Laura would talk about married life with Kane with an extremely happy face. Seeing Laura happy I gradually started to trust her decision. But Laura's visits gradually became less frequent. Her messages and calls to me also decreased. Even when I sent her messages for days, Laura would only reply briefly. The happy photos Laura shared with her husband on her personal account slowly turned into posts filled with hidden emotions. Once when I visited Laura, she looked visibly thinner. She led me into the house and I greeted Kane cheerfully. He responded with an extremely cold tone, not even looking at me. Kane looked at Laura with a threatening gaze. He said he had to go out for something and would be back in the afternoon. As soon as Kane left, Laura burst into tears when I asked how she was doing. She cried a lot for a long time. I hugged Laura, trying to comfort her. Although Laura didn't share anything, I knew she wasn't happy. In the following weeks, Laura kept posting images of herself on her social media. In these photos, Laura's facial features appeared familiar yet strangely different. Her eyes seemed soulless, gazing into an undefined space. What stood out was that all the photos had the same expression, no longer radiating the bright and innocent smile as before. Through these images, I noticed Laura become increasingly unfamiliar. I also noticed that the tattoo on her neck had disappeared. I wondered if that was really Laura. One evening, around 11 o'clock, I received a phone call. "Natalie, I'm scared. I just had a dream about Laura. She said she was having trouble breathing. Her face was distorted, limbs broken. I couldn't reach Laura anymore." Laura's grandmother cried and begged me to find Laura. I immediately tried to contact her, but also couldn't reach her. With a sense that something terrible had happened, I immediately reported to the local police in the town where Laura and Kane lived. When the police arrived at the house, both Laura and Kane were missing. The house was empty, devoid of any belongings. In the bedroom, they found a sex doll sitting on the bed. It looked exactly like Laura. The doll was still very new and appeared to have been cleaned before being left behind. The house was clean too, with no signs or personal belongings left behind. Through the street security cameras, the police couldn't find any trace of Laura and Kane for the past 10 days. They had vanished. Upon closer inspection of the images Laura had posted before disappearing, it wasn't Laura, but the doll that had been found. Where had they gone? The doll was sent back to Laura's grandmother by the police. She cried a lot. The doll seemed to remind her even more of Laura. Nearly a year passed, but news about Laura and Kane remained a mystery. I often visited Laura's grandmother. She cherished the doll and placed it in Laura's former bedroom, as if Laura still existed in this house. Looking at the doll, I truly wondered, what was its purpose? Why did everything in Laura's house disappear except for it? Suddenly, I noticed a part of the doll's arm seemed to be sticking out. There was something sharp inside, about to puncture the outer layer of the doll's skin. Laura's grandmother and I decided to cut open the doll's arm to see what was inside. As the knife sliced through, the doll's arm split open along a long seam. From within, a decaying human hand emerged along with the slimy silicone material. The smell of plastic and decay filled the air heavily. Laura's grandmother was in shock, clutching her chest and screaming before collapsing. I led her out of the living room and locked Laura's room, then called the police. After examination, the police determined that the body inside the sex doll was Laura's. The cause of Laura's death could not be determined. No words can describe the panic, and panic of Laura's grandmother at that moment. For the past 8 years, Kane has been on the run, with warrants issued throughout the United States and some neighboring countries. But they have never found any leads. Even his personal information is not on the national imagine. I always remember Laura, my sweet and warm-hearted girl. I'm Xavier, 21 years old. I'm a waiter in a luxury restaurant downtown. The restaurant is still in the works, so it's super busy right now. Some days I end up working late into the night, and man, my body feels beat. But hey, the pay is really good in return. I live with my dad in this old house at the end of the street. Every day, it's like an hour on the bus to get to work and back. My next goal is to afford a car so I can get around easier. One evening, after wrapping up work at 10:30 p.m., I rushed to the station to catch the last bus home. Because I've been so tired and not sleeping well for days, I passed out as soon as I hopped on the bus for 5 minutes. Luckily, I woke up just as the bus was pulling up near my house. I hustled home and crashed right into bed. The next morning when I woke up, out of habit, I reached for my phone first thing. But when I searched under my pillow and around my bed, my phone was nowhere to be found. I sat up, all groggy-faced from sleep, and dug through my backpack only to realize my phone was missing. Digging through my hazy memories of yesterday, I figured my phone must have fallen on the bus. After showering, I went downstairs and told my dad what happened. I borrowed my dad's phone and called my number. After a few rings, someone answered. A girl named Lisa, a high school student, answered on the other end of the line. Lisa found my phone on the bus. She promised to give it back and said she'd meet at a cafe near her school at 9 p.m. that night. Luckily, a nice girl found my phone. I took my dad's phone to work that day. In the evening, I asked to leave work early at the restaurant so I could go to the cafe. Just as I was almost there, a weird message popped up on my dad's phone. "Hey, it's Lisa. Your phone busted, so I took it to get it fixed. I'm in urgent. I'll leave first." Lisa texted me the repair shop's address, which was close to the cafe. I walked in, and there was just one guy working there. He had on a hat and a mask, and he wasn't very friendly. He told me my phone screen was broken, and he fixed it. I powered up my phone to check it out and make sure everything was cool. When I asked about the repair cost, the guy at the store said Lisa had already taken care of it. On the way home, I tried calling the number Lisa texted earlier to thank her, but it turned out the number didn't exist. I told my dad everything. He's super careful, so he started asking all these questions about Lisa. First off, Lisa found my phone on the bus around 11:30 p.m. Why was this high school kid out so late? Next thing, the phone was busted, but she was still picking up when I called this morning. And lastly, how does a student have enough money to cover phone repair bills? I didn't stress it and went back to my room. I tried calling Lisa's number again, but still couldn't get through. If I get to see her again, I'll definitely thank her. When I opened my phone, I found 3 pics of a dark room. Maybe Lisa or someone at the phone repair shop took those pics, so I deleted them. Also, the browser history had some really weird sites I'd never seen before. Other than that, the phone still works fine. The next day, I finished my work and was about to change clothes and head out. The restaurant manager called me over and said a customer wanted me to wait on their table. He said he's a regular here, goes by Owen. I'd been here a while, knew all the regulars, and I'd never seen him before. But actually, he looked and sounded really familiar. The dishes Owen asked for are usually only for VIPs here at the restaurant. After that, everything went as usual and Owen left after dinner. He slipped me a little tip too. The next morning, I freaked out seeing 80 missed calls from the restaurant manager. I woke up to hundreds of messages from coworkers, all blaming and cursing me. I posted an article on my personal website calling out a restaurant for using toxic ingredients. I even texted the manager, griping about the strict work style and low pay. I kept going and started dropping F-bombs on my colleagues. If they could have reached through the phone screen, they would have torn my scalp off. But seriously, I didn't do any of that crazy stuff. Why do I have to make myself look bad to everyone? I got fired from my job, and the restaurant was in bad shape too. The manager said he'd sue me for trashing the restaurant's reputation. I was totally crushed and just bawled my eyes out with my bestie Rose at the cafe, not ruling out the chance that my account got hacked. Some guy came up to me, acting like he knew me, which totally threw Rose and me off. When he said he was Owen, a regular at the restaurant, it clicked. I wasn't really in the mood, so I just gave him a quick answer and thanked him for being nice. But during our chat, he somehow got Rose's name right without her even saying a word since we met. Owen was pretty baffled. He mentioned he'd been sitting at the back table for a while and accidentally caught some of our chat. But when Rose gave him in the side eye and started drilling him with questions, he bailed right away. Rose warned me to watch out because nowadays, people can have some messed up ideas. At night, I couldn't sleep because some ex-coworkers were blowing up my phone with hate texts. Feeling mentally wrecked, I grabbed my phone to shut it down, but I froze. My phone was sending nasty texts to my ex-colleagues all by itself. I logged out and shut down the social media app, but then the phone just logged itself back in. No matter how many times I try, it's pointless. What's even wilder is the phone suddenly opened the camera and snapped my freaked out face. I just yelled and chucked the phone on the floor in frustration. A moment later, I heard my dad calling from outside the door. I hurried to open the door, crying, and spilled everything to my dad about what happened. He comforted me. A little later, while I was still in my room bawling, my dad brought Rose over and she gave me a hug. Dad stood at the door, staring at me with concern for a while, then walked off. The next day, when I was calmer, Rose and I spent the whole day watching the phone, recording all the weird stuff it was doing. I took the evidence to the cops, and it took the FBI a day to nail the guy behind it, Owen. When I confronted him at the police station, I tried to keep my cool. The FBI caught a bunch of phones from his place that were linked directly to victims like me. They also found notebooks that had all their activities, habits, and even their private pics recorded. Turns out, there wasn't any high school girl named Lisa. Owen was using some app to fake his voice. Owen got sentenced with a 5-year sentence and had to pay back all the folks he messed with. I got back to work and learned a valuable lesson from it. I'm Benny, 31 years old. I'm working as a production manager for one of the 10 largest companies in the US. I've worked very hard to get to my current position and I really love my job. My company often holds luxurious parties at the end of the year to appreciate employees' contributions throughout the working year. During the party, there will be activities including dining, entertainment, and a charity auction. Last year's end party also had similar activities as every year. This time the company allows employees to bring a relative along. I immediately thought of Donna, my beautiful girlfriend. The party invested by the company was very grand. The venue is a famous local 5-star restaurant. Donna and I arrived at the party greeting everyone. Donna is very excited about everything around her. Knowing my position in the company, she really admired it. I am also confident that I have scored more points in her eyes. The party with the participation of more than 3,000 employees was deafening. I told Donna to follow me closely to avoid getting lost. Around 6:30 p.m. we started the party. Company leaders will give opening remarks. The next part is to honor and reward employees who have made outstanding contributions. When standing on the podium to receive the award, I was very happy to see Donna standing below, clapping her hands and looking at me smiling. At 7 p.m., we started the dining portion. The party format will be buffet. Beautifully decorated and extremely luxurious dishes were served. The LED screen suddenly appeared with a video of the restaurant's chef. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Anthony, the restaurant's executive chef with nearly 30 years of experience. We would like to respectfully introduce to everyone dishes filled with passion, made from Anthony's unique ingredients, wishing everyone a delicious meal. Everyone was very surprised, and I was very impressed with the chef's eyes and smile at the end of the video. It felt like he was trying to convey something. Having the chef personally introduce the dish made us feel appreciated and cared for. This restaurant really knows how to please customers, I whispered in Donna's ear. She smiled happily. Everyone started eating and drinking happily. Donna's food is delicious. She constantly praises the food here. Not only Donna, everyone nodded while eating. I have quite a hard time eating. With unfamiliar foods, I will hesitate to eat them or even be cautious because I have some stomach problems. Seeing everyone's expressions while eating makes me curious about the taste. I took a look around. The dishes here didn't have name tags or any information about the ingredients. This is very strange compared to other 5-star restaurants I've been to. I don't know what the unique ingredient the chef said is. In the end, I chose a dish that was quite similar to steak. The taste of the dish is very strange, but very delicious. The meat is soft and mixed with sauce. I started to get excited and continued to enjoy the next dishes. Suddenly, Donna shouted loudly with joy. She ran up to me boasting that she had found a ring in the dessert. Donna picked up the ring and smiled excitedly. "Benny, I think it's a diamond." I looked at the ring. It was indeed decorated with a diamond-like stone. I and everyone nearby were surprised. Could this be a random lucky gift secretly prepared by the company? But lucky gifts usually won't be placed in dishes like that, which is confusing. I was bewildered, and Donna was very happy to put the ring on her finger. Suddenly, a guy standing not far from us exclaimed, "There are human fingers in the soup!" Everyone who could hear those words immediately turned their gaze towards the guy. Continuously, other strange things appear in foods such as hair, eyelashes, and nails. The surrounding atmosphere was chaotic. People talk endlessly about the food. The company representative requested to meet the restaurant's manager and chef. A loud crash and a girl's scream rang out right behind me and Donna. Everyone was silent. The large bowl of hot soup burst and flowed all over the floor. What made everyone scared and dumbfounded was the human skull with some skin still attached with 2 white eyes rolling on the floor. The hand bones with 5 intact fingers floated right in front of me and Donna. Donna hugged me tightly and fainted. Some people burst into tears, and some older people even had heart attacks. The sounds of vomiting, crying, screaming all created a chaotic scene. It's like the end of the world is coming. We have to try to escape from that cruelty. We didn't say it, but everyone was aware of what they had just eaten. The haunting incident caused the company huge losses when overnight, up to 30% of employees resigned.
The horror party from the restaurant was also reported by the national media, and the company's shares fell to a record level. The restaurant's chef was arrested. He's still very proud of what he did. According to the police investigation, the material he said was unique was taken from his wife, who had lived with him for 20 years. He was diagnosed with severe schizophrenia. Donna was so obsessed that she had to undergo psychological treatment at the hospital. Her family was very angry and asked me to stay away from their daughter. I have lost contact with Donna since then. Currently, I still work at the company. Every event organized by the company is also calculated and has very high requirements so that no more unfortunate events would have occurred. I'm Richard, 29 years old. I work as a driver for the ride-sharing company Uber. Currently, I live with my grandmother in a small house in San Francisco. Here, the demand for ride-sharing services from people is very high. I might be able to scrape out a living for me and my grandmother. If there's no important matter, I'll work every day from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. One weekend evening, I had almost no passengers for the whole day. At 10 p.m. when I was about to end my workday, suddenly the app showed a ride request. Looking at the distance, it was quite far, in the suburban area. But since I didn't have many passengers all day, I gladly decided to accept the ride. The passenger's location was about a mile from where I was standing. I started moving to pick up the passenger. When I arrived at the exact location, there was no one around. I felt quite anxious, thinking of calling the customer. Suddenly, a girl appeared out of nowhere, bending down to look through the car window and smiling at me. I startled. I dropped my phone, taking a few seconds to process everything. I quickly got out of the car to greet the girl, but I began to feel uneasy. She, with long tousled hair, wearing a long white dress, holding a doll. It wasn't an ordinary doll. Its face was haunting with large black eyes covering half of its face. It was more terrifying than the Annabelle doll in the horror movie I watched. As I was lost in my thoughts about the doll, suddenly the girl spoke.
Take me home, please.
Her voice was very soft, giving a gloomy feeling as if echoing from the depths of hell. I felt a surge of cold air running down my spine. I nervously chuckled and opened the car door for her, but she looked at me with amusement and then proceeded to open the door and sit in the back seat. I quickly sat in the driver's seat and started the car. Even though I'm a 29-year-old guy with a fairly tall stature, in that situation, I'm sure anyone would be as shaken as I was. I drove, my body drenched in sweat even though the air conditioning in the car was on. As I was about to stop at a red light, that girl uttered that scary voice again.
What if we run the red light? If you get fined, I'll pay. Don't worry.
After saying that, she chuckled, and I also laughed out loud to dispel that ominous atmosphere. But my laughter stuck in my throat. I said I'm a law-abiding person, so I wouldn't do that.
You're such a coward. But living people are usually like that. Unlike me.
Again, that teasing laughter, but it was really not amusing at all. My body was cold, but I kept sweating. All I could do was to gulp and stay as calm as possible. I remained silent, trying to drive a bit faster to end this ride. Occasionally, I glanced at the rearview mirror to check on the back seat. Focus on driving, please, that gentle voice echoed, making me startle, instantly stiffening my body. Suddenly, there was a desperate scream, and reflexively I turned back to look. A grotesque face with bulging white eyes full of red veins, the mouth screaming loudly, was inches from my face. The horror I felt at that moment cannot be described. I panicked and screamed loudly. Fortunately, the sharp reflexes of a driver helped me step on the brake correctly, instead of the gas pedal. The girl, holding the doll with the grotesque face, fell back into the back seat, laughing hysterically. I still hadn't recovered. My heavy breathing only seemed to excite her even more.
Do living people get startled like that?
What on earth was happening to me? I didn't know if I was carrying a person, a ghost, or mentally unstable. Seeing that I didn't say anything, discomfort was evident on her face. She twisted the doll's head back to its original position, with the black eyes as before, then dirtied it. She said she just wanted to play a little. I had thought of ending this ride here. The girl pointed forward, saying we were almost home, and I just needed to drive a little further. Having come this far, I reconsidered and continued driving. Now, whether it was a person or a ghost or anything else, I didn't care anymore. When we reached where she called home, I stopped, got out of the car politely, and opened the door. She stepped out, smiling at me. Now I looked closely. She was extremely beautiful, with a bright, innocent, and very attractive smile. The ride cost $40, and she handed me a $100 bill, saying there was no need to return the change. I thanked her and was about to turn and leave, but looking around, it was a dark dirt road with no houses around. I asked her if she was sure this was home. She laughed and said someone from her family would come to pick her up right now. I looked down and saw her standing on the ground with both feet and casting a shadow on the road under the car's headlights. I breathed a sigh of relief, reassuring myself that this wasn't a ghost. But I couldn't leave her alone like that, so I decided to stay with her until her family came to pick her up. A moment later, a luxurious Rolls-Royce arrived. The girl waved to me and got into the car. Only now did I understand what had happened. I also got in the car and drove in the opposite direction. Looking in the rearview mirror, my mind kept thinking about that girl. Now I remembered I hadn't asked her name. But just a few seconds later, when I looked back, the Rolls-Royce had disappeared into the night. I didn't know when. I couldn't be sure if everything was a dream or real, nor could I tell if that girl was a human or a ghost. I've heard and watched many stories and movies about supernatural phenomena, but I never thought I would encounter such an inexplicable phenomena in real life.
I am Mary Vincent, 45 years old. The story I'm about to tell is not just a terrifying memory of a fateful day, but also a reminder that life is sometimes shaped by moments that seem like the last. 30 years ago, I was just a young girl with simple dreams, a love for dancing, and a desire for freedom. One summer morning, a normal day that turned into the longest nightmare of my life. I was standing by the side of the highway with another couple, our thumbs raised, hoping that some car would stop to give us a ride. I needed to get to Los Angeles to visit my grandfather. The long journey and the heat of the road left me exhausted. Every minute of waiting on this deserted road felt like I was trapped in helplessness. I watched each car speed past, and finally, a truck stopped. The window rolled down, and inside was a middle-aged man, his calm face, smiling friendly. At my request, along with the couples, the man said the truck could only carry one person. I was a bit confused because the truck was still quite spacious. Tired and anxious, I stepped into the truck, ignoring the couple's advice to wait for another ride, and the rumbling engine carried me away from the stifling heat. The wind blew through the window, and fatigue quickly lulled me to sleep. When I opened my eyes, the scenery outside had changed. The highway had disappeared, replaced by a narrow road surrounded by dark forests. Thick foliage blocked most of the light, plunging everything into a dim, cold glow. I looked at the man, asking about the route we were taking, but he remained focused on driving, his lifeless eyes and cold expression. The air inside the truck grew heavy, as though the very oxygen had been sucked out. Fear started to rise. I knew I was in a place I should not be. Before I could fully understand the situation, he stopped the truck, saying he needed to use the bathroom. The air outside was colder than I expected. I stood by the side of the road, trying to breathe deeply to calm myself, but just then, everything happened so quickly that I had no time to react. He attacked me from behind, his rough hand gripping my wrist. I struggled, but his strength far surpassed mine. The cold rope quickly bound my hands, imprisoning me in the grip of a demon. The feelings of humiliation and disgust overwhelmed me as he tormented me right there in the truck. I couldn't cry, couldn't scream, only pain and fear consumed my entire body. He threatened me, his voice deep and raspy, hissing through his teeth, causing all hope of survival within me to vanish. As the sun began to set, he drove me to a desolate, rocky area. The atmosphere there felt like it belonged to another world. The wind howled through the sharp rocks, carrying the smell of dry earth. He dragged me out of the car and forced me to drink something. I couldn't resist, only feeling the bitter taste and the numbing sensation slowly taking over my body. Everything around me faded, leaving only fragmented images, the faint light from the setting sun, the cold wind cutting through my torn skin. When I woke up, the pain brought me back to reality. In front of me was the image of the man holding a gleaming axe. Absolute fear froze me. He said nothing, only coldly lowered the axe. Pain tore through my arm. I screamed in pain and despair. But that was not the end of the devil's cruelty. He threw me down the cliff, my body crashing violently against the cold stone. I could feel every joint crack, each wave of pain piercing through my entire body. I lay there, motionless, listening to my heartbeat slow down. But I didn't give up. A fire inside me still burned, reminding me that I had to live. I struggled to crawl up the cliff, using the remaining flesh of my arm to stop the bleeding. Cold, pain, and exhaustion surrounded me, but my fierce will to survive wouldn't allow me to quit. Every inch on that rocky wall was a battle, and each step down the dark path was a victory. Blood and mud covered my body, but I just knew I had to keep going. When the headlights of a car flashed in the dark, I raised my severed arm to signal for help. The car stopped, and I saw the horrified expressions of a couple. They took me to the hospital, and as the pain faded, I realized I had survived. In the days that followed, I lived with the haunting memories, the lifeless gaze of the man, the gleaming axe, and the feeling of free fall as I was thrown down the cliff. All of it still haunts me every moment. I recounted the entire ordeal to the police, using my own body as evidence to accuse the monster. He had to face the rightful punishment, to pay for his freedom. I survived to tell this story, learning to adjust to prosthetic arms and a new life. I will never forget the gaze of that man. I not only lost both of my arms, but I also lost my trust in humanity. But I have learned to live with the pain and the trauma, and I know that every day I am alive is a victory. I am proof that even in the darkest times, we can find the strength to survive. And I hope that my story will make someone think twice before getting into a stranger's car.
I'm Lonnie, 18 years old, the only daughter in the family. My family lives in the town of Atherton, California. The name Lonnie that I have also reflects the love that everyone has for me. Since I was little, I have always been described as a healthy, beautiful, and nice girl. Perhaps many people would think that I am so beautiful, partly inherited from my parents. But no, my parents look very different. My father is much older than his age. I don't have any resemblance to my father. My mother has pale, sallow skin, a thin and lifeless body. The lines on my mother's face are very beautiful, but they are not well taken care of. I often see my mother sitting alone with a pale and tired face. I would run to hug her and ask if she was okay. Mom would always smile kindly, hug me tightly, and cry for a long time. I was educated by my parents, and especially my grandmother, to be a good girl and not putting my nose into other people's affairs. So I grew up in a cocoon of love and affection. I was carefree and obedient to adults. Even in situations I didn't like, I wouldn't resist or argue. Speaking of my grandmother, her name is Ira. My grandmother is very young and beautiful. Completely different from my mother. My grandmother has fair, smooth skin, a firm and attractive figure, even though she's almost 60 years old. I know my grandmother is a single mother. She has only one child, my father. I have never seen her mention any other relatives, and I also don't know anyone other than my father, mother, and grandmother. My grandmother's house is about a 30-minute drive from my house. My parents would take me to stay with her every weekend. My grandmother is very gentle. She teaches me to always love and take care of myself. Do not let any dirty marks appear on your skin because you will look very ugly. Your hair must always be fragrant and smooth. The clothes you wear must be the most beautiful and expensive. Do not eat food which origins are unknown. You must eat food prepared by your mother's own hands or prepared by me. Those are the things my grandmother always teaches me since I was little. Every weekend, staying with my grandmother made me very happy because I felt loved very much. One weekend, my parents took me to visit her. When she saw the small scratches on my nails, my grandmother got angry with my parents. On such occasions, I always saw my mother's face full of fear and panic. My mother dared not speak up. There's another strange thing. Every time my parents took me to visit my grandmother, my mother and grandmother would go into a separate room to talk. Dad and I would wait outside. I would look towards the door of my grandmother's room. It would be a long time before they came out. I would run to hug my mother again, every time I saw the fatigue and discomfort on her face. On my mother's hand, every time they came out of my grandmother's room, there would always be a plaster. My mother would try to shield it with her hand, but I always saw it. In the summer of the year I finished middle school, my grandmother said my parents should let me stay with her for a long time. During the days at my grandmother's house, I got to know a neighbor boy my age named Mike. Mike is kind and funny. We quickly became friends. One day, while playing with Mike, I accidentally slipped and fell. Mike quickly helped me up. Blood was flowing from my hand. I was worried that I would be scolded more than worrying about the wound. My grandmother suddenly appeared with a terrifying, angry face. She grabbed my hand, looked at the bleeding wound, took a deep breath. I thought she was trying to calm down. Mike, seeing my grandmother's angry face, stood frozen in fear. Both Mike and I seemed unable to breathe, staring intently at my grandmother. My grandmother held my hand, slowly led me closer to Mike. Then, my grandmother looked at me, looked at the wound on my hand, then turned to look at Mike. Very quickly, strongly, and decisively, my grandmother slapped Mike hard. She shouted loudly, demanding that Mike stay away from me forever. I looked at Mike, feeling guilty for my friend, but I didn't dare to speak up for him. I just bowed my head and remained silent, because I was very scared. My grandmother took me home. I always had to prepare mentally for her punishment. But grandmother gently sat down beside me, lifted my injured arm to observe. Then, my grandmother kissed the wound. I looked at her in surprise. My blood was smeared all over my grandmother's mouth. She looked at me, smiling kindly as usual, but mysteriously and frighteningly. She said she would help me bandage the wound and then lick the blood on her mouth, an expression of satisfaction. I was very scared. My emotions were chaotic. I sat there motionless, afraid to speak up, just silent. The terrifying strictness and surveillance of my grandmother as I approached the age of 18, it made me suffocate. I began to notice my mother's aging more and more clearly and quickly, while my grandmother's beauty seemed to last forever. I was old enough to understand and wanted to find out about everything. My grandmother always remained silent in the face of my questions. One evening, when my family was having dinner with my grandmother, my mother suddenly collapsed on the dining table and fainted. I worriedly tried to wake my mother up while my father called for an ambulance. I felt chilled by the indifferent gaze and the faint smile on my grandmother's lips. My mother was diagnosed with severe anemia and passed away after being hospitalized for a day. I was completely devastated. I lost one of my 3 closest relatives too suddenly. My mother's funeral was as cold and fleeting as the way my mother left me. I had to take nearly a month off from school because my mental state was unstable. One day, I came home from school. Passing by my parents' room, I suddenly heard my grandmother's voice. I gently approached to listen. She's almost 18. Quickly find another replacement and nurture her well. Our bodies only suit the cleanest and purest things. I looked through the crack in the door, horrified to see an old, ugly woman with red glowing eyes drinking a bowl of blood. Blood dripping down her chin and neck. That elderly face gradually rejuvenated. Her eyes returned to normal. It was my grandmother. The drops of blood fell to the floor, being licked clean by my father, who knelt down. The satisfaction on their faces, along with the maniacal laughter, completely destroyed me.
I'm Ricky, 35, still single, and just trying to find some peace after everything life's thrown at me. My new place is on the edge of a quiet little town, tucked right up next to the forest. The vibe here is totally different from the packed, noisy spots I used to live in. The houses are spread out, mostly older folks living here, just looking for some peace in their golden years. The house is simple, but comfy, with a little backyard facing the woods and a dirt road that takes you into town. Across from my place is this old house with peeling paint and a wooden fence stacked with layers, making it look even older. The guy who owned it was this guy in his 50s named Gavin. Found that out when I said hi to the neighbors. I spotted Gavin a few times, not because I was nosy, just wanted to know when he was around so I could say hey. On the afternoon of day 3 after moving in, I swung by Gavin's place to say hi and share some cake. Gavin opened the door looking awkward, but he lit up real quick when I introduced myself and said hey. He invited me in, and while he sounded friendly, his voice had this weird shake to it. I walked in and noticed his place was pretty messy. The furniture was old, and it felt kind of stuffy with no natural light. I plopped down on the old sofa, and Gavin brought me a glass of orange juice. I smiled, grabbed it, took a sip, but then had to stop right away. There was a long, yellow hair floating in the drink. I tried to ignore the weirdness, set the glass down, and looked up at him. I asked him a bit about his life, and Gavin said he was also on his own, like the neighbors, and that he was fine with everything for now. As Gavin was talking, he turned away and suddenly blasted the music really loud, the high-pitched tune shaking the whole place. I couldn't hide my surprise, and Gavin busted out laughing, his face all red and puffed up, saying that was his way of chilling out. I started feeling disrespected, so I politely said bye and left. That was the one and only time I went to Gavin's place and talked to him. Every move Gavin made, every look in his eyes, just screamed weird eccentricity. Even though I tried not to judge, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't like any of the other older folks I'd met. One time when I was coming back from town, I walked by Gavin's place and saw a young girl standing at the window and waving at me. But the way she looked was off, way too excited for just a random encounter. I clearly remembered Gavin saying he lived alone, so maybe this was his daughter stopping by for a visit. I smiled back, telling myself not to overthink it, but I still had a weird feeling about the whole thing. Then one night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of stuff crashing, furniture being smashed, and kids crying loudly just left me feeling totally confused. I went to the window to check it out, and I guessed the noise was coming from Gavin's place. I didn't want to get involved in other people's family drama, but those sounds really made me uneasy. A few days later, I saw another girl at Gavin's place. She was by the window too, looking all rushed, waving at me way too eagerly, like she was trying to get my attention. I was pretty sure this wasn't the same girl I saw last time. The girl's eyes didn't look happy. Instead, she seemed worried and in a rush about something. The confusion in my mind just kept growing, but I kept telling myself I was probably overthinking it. Once again, I gave her a quick hello and then just took off. The third time, I saw a girl totally different from the other two, with shiny golden hair. She just stood there, waving her hand slowly, not saying a word. This time I couldn't calm down anymore, so I decided to go over and ask. But after I took a few steps, Gavin came out of the house, looked at me, and nodded his chin. I was gonna ask about the girls, but when I pointed to the window, she was gone. Who were these girls? Why did they keep showing up and disappearing? The questions kept swirling in my head, sticking with me day and night, making it hard to focus on anything else. I hit peak unease when I saw this skinny, pale girl with cuts on her arm standing in front of his house. Seeing that made it impossible for me to sit still. I decided to call the cops and tell them about all the weird stuff I'd seen. The police showed up pretty quickly. As they knocked on the guy's door, I stood at my window, heart pounding. At first, he answered the door all calm, but when the police asked to come in and check, he got all tense. The police searched the house, and what they found freaked both me and them out. Up on the second floor, they found 3 girls locked up. All 3 were chained up, their bodies really skinny, covered in old and new wounds. Those girls were the ones I'd seen through the window. What was even worse and totally disgusting was that the 3 girls were the victims of Gavin's kidnapping, keeping them locked up and abusing them for the past 10 years. The little girl was Gavin's daughter with the second girl he had kidnapped. I stood outside, frozen, watching the police take that bastard to the car. His face was no longer the cheerful or confused look like the first day we met. It was just cold, blank, and creepy. I went back home, but the images of those girls, their pleading eyes, and the creepy sounds from the night before kept popping up in my head. All 3 of them had called out to me, full of hope, joy, panic, and desperation. I can't stop thinking that if I hadn't called the police, they would have had to keep going through that pain for who knows how many more years. Based on a true case that once shocked the entire United States, this story tells of 3 young women who were illegally held captive for a decade by a man in a house in Cleveland, Ohio. The first victim was Michelle Knight, who was 21 years old at the time. A year later, 17-year-old high school student Amanda Berry went missing on her way home from work. The last was Gina DeJesus, who was only 14 when she lost contact with her family.
My name is Iris, and I live in Leicester, North Carolina, a quiet community that is half country and half suburb. My closest neighbor was a woman named Holly, who lived alone with her 2 pet dogs. Since we both had a habit of waking up early to go jogging, we often ran into each other and would jog together for a stretch. We weren't incredibly close, but we always shared some friendly small talk whenever we met. One morning, I went out for my usual jog, but Holly was nowhere to be found. As I passed by her house, I noticed a strange man standing near her driveway. He looked unkempt with messy hair, and his eyes kept darting around as if he were keeping watch. In his hand, he was holding a black trash bag. The moment our eyes met, he suddenly flashed a friendly smile, which completely contradicted his sneaky behavior from a second ago. It made me feel uncomfortable, and I didn't want to get involved in someone else's business, so I pretended not to notice and kept running. On my second lap around the block, I passed Holly's house again, and the man was gone. However, the black trash bag had been left behind near the edge of the road, about 20 yards away from her property. I assumed he was just some litter bug dumping his garbage in someone else's neighborhood. I didn't see Holly for the rest of my morning jog. I figured she wasn't feeling well and had decided to skip her workout for the day. But by that afternoon, I still hadn't seen her out walking her dogs like she always did. Holly owned 2 large dogs that were incredibly energetic, and she took them outside to run around every single day. Seeing them cooped up felt very strange, and a bad feeling started lingering in the back of my mind. The next morning, as I jogged past her house, I heard the dogs whining from inside. They sounded miserable and highly distressed. Trusting my gut, I stopped and decided to go check on things. I called out her name a few times, but no one answered. Noticing the front door was unlocked and cracked open, I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside.
Following the sound of the whimpering, I found the two dogs locked inside a guest bedroom. They were scratching at the door and crying continuously. The moment I let them out, they began searching the house, running straight into Holly's master bedroom to look for their owner. I hurried after them and froze in shock. The safe had been pried wide open and the bedroom window was smashed to pieces. Sensing that something terrible had happened, I called the police immediately. When the police arrived to inspect the home, they confirmed there were clear signs of a break-in. However, there was no blood, no signs of a struggle, and zero evidence to prove an attack had actually taken place inside. At first, the officers assumed Holly had simply gone out of town for a few days. That night, right after I drifted off to sleep, I had a horrific nightmare. In the dream, I saw my neighbor dead. Her body was trapped under a car, and a pair of large hands was dragging her away. The scene then shifted into a bathroom, where a man was stripping off her clothes and stuffing them into a black trash bag. I bolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat, with my heart hammering violently against my ribs. The image of the black trash bag from my nightmare immediately connected with the exact bag the unkempt man had been holding in front of Holly's house the day before. As soon as the sun came up, I contacted the police and gave them every detail about the suspicious stranger. I later learned that the police managed to track the trash collection route for our area. But since 2 days had already passed, the garbage had been hauled to a massive landfill, making the search incredibly difficult. After sorting through mounds of waste, they finally found the black trash bag matching my description. Inside were Holly's blood-stained clothes, along with DNA and fingerprints belonging to the man. The suspect was quickly identified as a man named Gavin. He lived in a remote part of town and had known Holly previously. According to Gavin's confession, everything started as an accident when he asked Holly to help push his stuck vehicle. He claimed he accidentally hit the gas pedal instead of the brake and ran her over, killing her instantly. Instead of panicking or calling 911, the savage killer calmly drove her body to his property, dismembered her, and burned the remains to destroy the evidence. After that, he casually returned to Holly's house, broke the window, and cracked the safe to stage a robbery and throw off the investigation. I thought that was the most horrifying part of the story. But as the police dug deeper into his background, they discovered Gavin was linked to a cold case involving a missing person from 15 years ago. On his property, investigators uncovered a hidden pit containing human skeletal remains that had been burned and concealed for over a decade. To this day, what haunts me the most isn't just what Gavin did to Holly. It is the memory of him standing just a few feet away from me, holding a bag containing his victim's bloody clothes, looking me dead in the eye and smiling. It was the calculated smile of a cold-blooded killer. If I had let my curiosity get the better of me and stopped talking to him that morning, I could have very easily become another missing person on Gavin's record. Following the tragedy, I went through the legal process to adopt Holly's poor dogs. Every day when I walk them down our usual path and look over at Holly's empty house, I silently promise her that I will take the best care of them. It is my way of thanking fate for letting me survive my encounter with a monster. This story is inspired by a true case that shocked the nation in 2015. A young couple, Christy Schoen and Joseph Codd, suddenly vanished from their home in North Carolina while expecting their first child. The crime scene showed signs of a staged break-in. Thanks to neighbors who reported a suspicious vehicle, police arrested Robert Jason Owens, a handyman who knew the family. He confessed to accidentally running them over, dismembering them, and burning their remains in a wood stove. A wider investigation revealed this killer was also responsible for the high-profile disappearance of a college student named Zeb Quinn 15 years earlier in the year 2000.
That fateful night helped me turn my life around, but it happened in the most horrific way a human being could ever experience. My name is Dante. Years ago, when I was an addict living on the streets of Philadelphia, my entire life revolved around finding enough money for my next fix. At first, I worked all kinds of odd jobs like delivering packages and loading trucks to pay for my drugs. But as my addiction grew worse, my body started failing me. My need for the drugs increased, so I turned to theft. I noticed an older man in my neighborhood who lived all alone in a rather luxurious townhouse. He seemed wealthy, kept to himself, and was usually away from home in the evening. So one night, while experiencing a violent wave of withdrawal, I risked breaking into his house. My plan was to steal anything I could sell. As soon as I stepped inside, I smelled a very strong chemical odor. Right as I paused, I jumped in fear because it felt like hundreds of eyes were staring directly at me in the dark. I stood frozen for a few seconds. When nothing happened, I slowly shined my flashlight around. I realized the entire house was filled with life-size dolls. I was startled, but the withdrawal pains were too intense for me to feel proper fear or care about the owner's eccentricity. I began rummaging through everything, searching for valuables, but the house contained nothing except for those dolls. Losing my patience as my cravings hit a breaking point, I started to snap. I began knocking over furniture and cursing. In a fit of rage, I swung my arm and shoved a doll that was sitting on a nearby armchair. When it hit the floor, my first thought was that it felt unusually heavy. It made a dull, solid thud against the ground, completely missing the hollow, brittle sound of plastic or foam. Immediately, an automated musical melody started playing from inside the doll. It sounded like a wooden music box, but the tune was strangely warped and distorted. I bent down and shined my flashlight closer. Because of the hard fall, the doll's head had snapped completely off the body. Right then, a disgusting stench mixed with the heavy smell of chemicals rushed up my nose, making me gag. What was sticking out from under the dress wasn't a plastic arm. It looked like shriveled, dried-up skin. My heart began to pound wildly. With a shaking hand, I moved the beam of light over to the head, lying right next to it. The wax mask on one side of the cheek had cracked open from the impact. Beneath that outer layer of wax, there was absolutely no plastic mold. It was a real human skull, covered in dried, stained scalp skin, with two empty, deep black eye sockets staring straight back at me. It felt like a jolt of electricity surged through my brain. I was so stunned that I completely forgot about my withdrawal symptoms. I slowly panned my flashlight around, looking back at the dozens of dolls surrounding the house. I snapped completely out of my drug haze as I realized exactly what I was standing in the middle of. In a state of total panic, I dropped the flashlight, sprinted out the front door, and just kept running and vomiting frantically. I found a public payphone and called the police. For the next few days, I watched the news constantly, waiting for the results of the police investigation. Finally, the official details were released. Right after receiving my call, the police had searched the house and found a massive list of suspicious items. Research files on hundreds of cemeteries, maps marking the locations of specific graves, digging tools, and plenty of documents proving the homeowner was grave robbing. The owner of the house was Professor Victor, a famous historian who had appeared on television and was highly respected as a model intellectual. But behind that image lay a horrific truth. The 29 dolls inside that house were not models at all. They were all real human beings that he had collected. It turned out that the evenings he was away from home were spent wandering around local cemeteries, digging up and stealing corpses. Just thinking about the fact that I used to walk past that house without knowing what was hidden inside sends a chill down my spine. The hundreds of eyes staring at me when I entered that house were actually real. It wasn't a hallucination caused by my addiction. After the investigation, the court concluded that Victor suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and truly believed his own distorted thoughts. They also determined he had no other deviant motives toward the bodies. However, that didn't make his actions any less horrifying. When he stood in court, Victor looked directly at the families of the victims and coldly stated, "You abandoned your daughters. I am the one who brought them back and kept them warm." That sentence made the entire courtroom go silent in shock. The families were filled with rage and agony, hearing the man who dug up their children's bodies speak such words. In the end, Victor was committed to a mental hospital indefinitely. As for me, after that horrific night, I was determined to get clean. That night made me realize that if I kept living that way, I would sooner or later die in some lonely corner or push myself into an even worse nightmare. I am Daniel, 40 years old. I came very close to death. It all started during a flight in June of this year. My brother Jacob and I were flying from Mumbai back to Manchester for our cousin's wedding. The flight took place in the morning. The weather was sunny and clear. I sat in seat 11A by the emergency exit. Jacob was next to me. Everything was normal as the plane taxied onto the runway. I even texted my wife that we were about to take off. No one thought that 30 seconds later, everything would fall apart. Right after the plane left the ground, I felt the engine stutter, as if it was choked. In the very next second, in a chilling moment of silence, the entire plane seemed to stall in midair. There was no engine sound, only the sound of breathing and a pounding heart in my ears. 5 seconds later, the left engine emitted a deafening explosion. My entire body was thrown forward out of the seat, then violently pulled back by the seatbelt, causing my chest to slam into the strap and my breath caught in my lungs. Everything in the cabin swayed in a fraction of a second. The cabin lights flashed erratically, green mixed with white, then went dark. A flight attendant screamed something, but before the sentence was finished, the plane plunged straight down. I saw Jacob's face turn to look at me, his eyes wide, his lips moving without a sound. Then everything exploded. The sound of twisting metal, shattering glass. Other passengers' screams merged with a terrifying crash. The plane had collided, as I later learned, with a medical student dormitory. The impact flung me to the right. My head slammed into the side of the plane, and my vision was a mix of red and black. A constant ringing noise filled my ears. The smell of burnt fuel and thick smoke was overwhelming. In that moment, I thought I was dead, but I don't know how long it was before I opened my eyes and I was still breathing. My eyes were blurry from smoke and debris, but I could still see the hellish scene around me. Plane seats were shredded. Bent metal jutted out everywhere like giant blades. Bodies were scattered in various positions, blood pooling on the floor. My left arm wouldn't move. A searing pain ran from my shoulder down the entire left side of my body. My leg was trapped under the collapsed seat in front of me. I remembered and shouted Jacob's name, but there was only silence. I heard the distant sound of a fire truck siren. As I crawled out of the passenger compartment, I collapsed onto the shattered concrete of the building. A police officer ran over. He said something, but I couldn't hear clearly. All I could hear was a long ringing in my ears. I was put into an ambulance. What I remember next was the terrible pain. After receiving treatment, this is what I was left with. My shoulder was fractured in 2 places. My back had a spinal injury. My right kneecap was shattered. The left side of my body was partially paralyzed. I couldn't lift my left arm above my shoulder. I moved back to Buffalo for treatment, but the physical pain was followed by mental exhaustion and obsession. I lived in a closed room, refusing to see anyone. I didn't talk to my wife and children, though I once considered them my whole world. My 4-year-old son once asked, "Where does Daddy hurt?" But I couldn't answer. I could only sleep 3 to 4 hours each night. Nightmares always dragged me back to the moment the plane crashed, the screams, the sound of metal twisting. I always wore a Yankees baseball cap because it was Jacob's. He died right next to me. I became so negative that I once thought, God gave me life but took away all the happiness from me and my family. I couldn't work. The compensation from the airline hadn't been settled. My wife had to carry everything by working extra night shifts. and all I did was lie in a dark room and wonder why I was alive. I sought help from a psychiatrist. They called it survivor's guilt. It's considered a symptom within the PTSD group, post-traumatic stress disorder. The doctor suggested many methods, but they didn't help much. I have accepted the reality, but I haven't been able to escape it. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of the passengers who flew with me that day. The man in the row behind, clutching his brown leather briefcase. The young woman with headphones, nodding to the rhythm of the music. The silver-haired woman holding a newspaper. They all perished. I don't know why I remember their faces so clearly, even though I only glanced at them once. Every night, I dream of them looking at me. Their eyes hold no resentment, but they repeatedly ask, "Why are you still alive?" 6 months after the accident, I stepped out of my room for the first time to face my wife and son. My wife was cooking dinner, and my son was playing with toy cars on the rug. The house was decorated with colorful Christmas decorations. My nose stung as I realized my son was a little taller. My wife looked much thinner. When they saw me, they both ran over, concerned. Then I realized the terrible thing I had done. I had isolated myself from my wife and son for 6 months, but they were still here, always waiting and loving me. Unlike the families of the other 279 people, they didn't get the chance to welcome their loved ones home. I began to take my treatment more seriously, trying every way to return to my former life. Although I know it will never be completely the same, I am writing this story to remind myself it was not my fault. I am incredibly lucky that I survived, and I must cherish that luck. I must live well, live for Jacob too. Yesterday, my son asked, "Daddy, does it still hurt?" "Yes, son, but I will be okay." The story is inspired by a real-life accident. In June 2025, a serious aviation tragedy occurred in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India, when an Air India Boeing 787 Dreamliner carrying over 240 passengers and crew members en route to London, England, crashed just minutes after takeoff. The accident killed almost everyone on board, but miraculously, only one person survived. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, 40, a British national seated in seat 11A. Despite miraculously surviving what was considered a near-certain death, he suffered severe psychological trauma and was quickly transported to a civil hospital in India for treatment.
I am Howard, a late-night radio host in New Orleans. I host a show called Night Whispers on a local FM station. Every night, I take calls from people who need to talk. They are insomniacs, lonely souls, or people carrying big secrets. They talk about everything: painful divorces, strange dreams, or wild conspiracy theories. They can choose to tell me who they are or stay anonymous. I'm used to the chaos of the night, but I was not prepared for what happened that evening. The studio was small and completely soundproof. Only the dim blue light from the control panels lit the room. Outside, the city of New Orleans was asleep. It was just me and the steady hum of the radio waves. Around 1 in the morning, I received a call. The screen showed a blocked number. I picked up. "Welcome to Night Whispers. This is Howard." "Hello, Howard," a man's voice said. I guessed he was middle-aged. I thought he just needed to vent like everyone else. He called himself Clay. I was about to ask about his job or family, but Clay suddenly cut me off. His voice was flat and calm. "I have killed 12 sex workers." I froze. My hand stopped right over the volume knob. At first, I thought this was just a sick joke or a drug addict talking nonsense. I took a breath and prepared to hang up professionally, but Clay kept talking before I could say a word. "I killed the first one when I was only 16. I planned it in advance, and I have never been caught." My throat went dry. There was something about the stillness in his voice that made it impossible for me to hang up. "Are you being serious, Clay?" He began to describe how he operated.
He said he usually found his victims in the New Orleans East area, where sex workers gathered. He didn't have to hunt. He would just park his car, turn on some music, and wait. He always chose women who looked weak and easy to manipulate. I tried to find a psychological motive, a reason to believe he was just a broken person. Were you abused? Or was it your mother? No, Howard. Don't look for those cliché reasons. He laughed softly. It was a dry, hollow sound. My mother was a wonderful woman. I didn't do it because of anyone else. I did it for the power. When you hold someone's life in your hands and they look at you with wide, pleading eyes, in that moment, you are God. A cold chill began to crawl down my spine. Every word Clay said pulled me deeper into a dark place. It shattered my calm exterior. He told me that sometimes he had made love with the victims before killing them. Sometimes I didn't need a reason. I didn't even need to reach a climax. I just wanted to end someone. He then shared a disgusting detail about murdering a transgender person. After realizing the victim's gender, he intentionally placed money in a sensitive area of the body to mock them. I always paid them, Howard. Even if they couldn't use it afterward, they deserved to get paid for their work. I stayed silent. All my skills for handling difficult callers were useless. Clay didn't seem to need me to say anything. He just needed a place to confess. He continued to fill the silence on his own. Don't you think you'll eventually pay for what you've done? I'm very good at hiding, he answered. He said he once thought about leaving a signature for the police. He wanted to dip a victim's thumb in paint and press it onto the body like a piece of art, inspired by a comic book. But in the end, it felt like too much trouble, so I didn't. Then, Clay mentioned one final detail that gave me goosebumps. When the bodies were found, the police suspected an officer who had a history with one of the victims. The whole investigation went the wrong way. It's funny, isn't it? I knew that case. The newspapers had reported on an officer who was suspended because of that suspicion. The details Clay gave were too accurate and too realistic to be a joke. So, why are you making this call and telling me everything? Clay sighed. He answered, as if he were talking to himself. I haven't done this for almost a year. At first, it was because my car broke down. But then I found that I could control myself. Did you ever spare anyone? Clay was silent for a moment. Yes. A few of them looked too innocent. There was one girl who reminded me of my ex-fiancé. I felt bad for her and let her go. I didn't have time to ask anything else. Clay suddenly hung up. I sat motionless in the studio. The hum of the radio waves felt like insects buzzing in my head. I tried to finish the broadcast. I hosted the rest of the show like nothing had happened, but my hands were soaked with sweat. The next morning, I didn't call the police right away. It wasn't because I took the confession lightly. It was because I had no physical evidence other than a phone call that lasted less than 10 minutes. I had no name and no address. I only had a calm voice and a series of chilling details from a horrific story. To this day, I still haven't forgotten that steady voice. If what Clay said was true, then somewhere out there in the city of New Orleans, a serial killer is still living free. And that night, he chose me to lighten his burden. This story is based on a real event from 1995. A man calling himself Clay called the Howard Stern radio show and confessed to killing 12 sex workers in New Orleans. To this day, the true identity of Clay and the authenticity of the murders remain one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in radio history. My name is Michael Collins, and I live in Tampa, Florida. I hate Florida summers. The humid heat feels like a wet blanket wrapped around your body, making my apartment feel like an oven. even with the AC blasting at full power. That night, the night everything ended, was no different. I walked into the apartment after my shift at the Clearwater Casino. The faint smell of whiskey lingered in the air. Rebecca, the woman I'd lived with for 2 years, a nurse at Tampa General Hospital, had already started drinking before I got home. Our relationship wasn't love. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Both of us carried wounds from our pasts. I had my uncontrollable anger and the bottle of whiskey that never left my bedside. She had bruises left behind by old relationships and a deep, gnawing fear of being abandoned. Two broken people trying to form something whole, only to hurt each other more. 2 weeks earlier, drunk and angry, I shoved Rebecca into the wall. The impact knocked over the table lamp, shattering it. A piece of glass cut her arm, leaving a long scar. I apologized 1,000 times, swore it would never happen again. But Rebecca's eyes had already turned cold. Everything between us was dying. That evening, we sat on the couch drinking and watching some mindless TV show. My head was foggy from alcohol and exhaustion. My phone vibrated. It was Jack, my last real friend. I stepped out onto the balcony to answer. His voice was tense. He told me he'd seen Rebecca at a bar the night before. She had been extremely drunk and had hinted at threats, revenge, and some disturbing plans. Jack warned me to leave the apartment immediately, but I ignored him. I went back inside. Rebecca was sitting there with a strange smile on her lips. A large black suitcase was sitting in the middle of the floor. Rebecca introduced a game, a challenge. I was supposed to climb into the suitcase and see how long I could last before begging to be let out. In my drunken haze, it sounded like a weird, harmless dare. Why not? We'd done crazier things before. I remember the feeling of climbing inside that suitcase. At first, there was a childish thrill, like hiding in a secret cave. It was big enough for me to curl up in, knees pulled tight to my chest. Rebecca leaned over me, smiling softly. When I heard the zipper closing, I was still laughing. Darkness swallowed me, with only a sliver of light slipping through the seam. The cramped, humid space quickly filled with my own hot breath, sweat dripping down my back. The first few minutes passed quietly. I heard Rebecca moving around. She was getting more ice for her drink. I asked when she would let me out. No answer. I assumed she was messing with me. But after a few more minutes, I started feeling genuinely uneasy. The air felt thick, suffocating. The heat pressed in on me. Nausea rose in my throat. I told her to open it. Still no answer. Instead, I heard a quiet laugh and the click of a phone camera. Around minute 9 or 10, real fear seeped in. The suitcase suddenly felt less like a hiding spot and more like a coffin. Every breath felt harder. The air was disappearing. I began begging. That's when Rebecca finally spoke, her voice cold and distant. She said this was the lesson I deserved for everything I'd done to her. The bruises, the insults, the broken lamp, the late-night ER trip. I finally understood. This wasn't a game. I pounded on the walls of the suitcase, kicked, threw my weight at it, anything to break out. But the thick fabric held, and being curled in a helpless position meant I had no leverage. The noise I made wasn't loud enough, and our apartment was always noisy from our fights. No neighbor would find anything unusual. 20 minutes later, my body started to seize. Panic made my breathing faster, burning through what little oxygen I had left. My fingers went numb. My head spun. I didn't have the strength to pound anymore. I heard Rebecca turn on the TV, loud enough to drown out the faint sounds I was still making. She even talked to someone on the phone, her voice calm, casual, like nothing was happening. Time became distorted. My brain tried to recall how long a person could survive with no air. 3 minutes? 5? I heard Rebecca moving around the apartment, then silence. Did she go to bed? While I was suffocating a few feet away? My last breath was a soft exhale. Death wasn't as terrifying as I thought. It felt like slipping into sleep after an unbearably long day. The only difference was that I would never wake up again. Death wasn't the end of my story. No, only the middle chapter. I watched Rebecca the next morning as she woke up. Her eyes widened as she remembered. She walked toward the suitcase with hesitant steps and unzipped it with trembling hands. Her scream caught in her throat when she saw my twisted, blue, rigid body. After her panic subsided, a strange calm washed over her. Rebecca started planning, wiping fingerprints, deleting messages, preparing a story about a drunk hide-and-seek game gone wrong. She dialed 911 with a shaking, tearful voice. Detective Daniels was the first to question her version. He noticed the bruises on my body, but fate stepped in. Rebecca's phone. She had forgotten to delete the videos and photos she took of me inside the suitcase. The undeniable proof of an intentional killing. The trial began 6 months later. Rebecca wore a Navy suit, keeping up the facade of a tragic accident. But when the evidence was shown, her composure shattered. On the final day, Rebecca confessed. Not out of guilt, but as a legal strategy. She talked about our violent, toxic history, the wounds I had caused her. She claimed she just lost control. The jury didn't buy it. Rebecca Sloan was sentenced to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder. Looking back on my life, I see all the terrible choices that led me into that suitcase. The drinking, the rage, the violence, the toxic relationship I didn't have the courage to leave. I wasn't an innocent victim. I died in a suitcase, a coffin I chose long before I climbed into it. And the worst part is, a small part of me still wonders, would she have opened it if I begged harder? This story was inspired by a real case. In the Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres case, Jorge Torres was found dead inside a suitcase in Orange County, Florida. His girlfriend, Sarah Boone, 45, was taken into questioning. At first, Sarah couldn't explain Jorge's injuries, but later admitted their relationship involved mutual violence, including Jorge hitting her weeks earlier. A video found on Sarah's phone showed her next to the suitcase, while Jorge said he couldn't breathe. Sarah responded coldly and laughed. She claimed it was a drunken hide-and-seek game and that she fell asleep while he was inside. She faces second-degree murder charges and could receive up to 16 years in prison if convicted.
I lived alone in a log cabin on the edge of the city. My husband died in a car crash. Our only son drowned 2 years later. When all the people I loved were gone, the only one left was Rocky, the male chimpanzee I had raised since he was 2 months old. For the past 14 years, Rocky had been my comfort, slowly helping my life stabilize again. I taught him basic activities like opening the refrigerator, watching television, and having afternoon tea with me. He had even appeared in a local juice commercial. His gentle face was printed on flyers all over the neighborhood. The neighbors were all familiar with seeing Rocky sitting in a chair on the front porch, waving at them like a friend. They came to Rocky's birthday party every year. We took commemorative photos together, and Rocky was called a special citizen of our neighborhood. One morning, I noticed something was wrong. Rocky refused to eat breakfast. He kept pacing back and forth in the living room, his eyes looking at me with a restless expression. He let out a low growl when I came near, then turned away again. I thought maybe Rocky was tired, so I made him a cup of licorice tea. Rocky usually loved this type of tea. I added the 2 tranquilizer pills that the vet had prescribed into the cup, hoping he would calm down. Rocky drank the tea completely, but he kept pacing, and his abnormal behavior seemed to be getting worse. Rocky repeatedly scratched his claws down the wooden floor, making a horrible screeching sound that gave me goosebumps. Closer to noon, I decided to call my best friend Jennifer for help. She had a master's degree in primate behavior from the University of California and had helped me train Rocky a few times before. Jennifer agreed and said she would come right away. While waiting for Jennifer, I stayed close to Rocky, rubbing his back and gently trying to reassure him. Rocky sat next to me but kept letting out low growls, his eyes constantly looking around very cautiously. About 20 minutes later, I heard a car stop in front of the house. Through the window, I saw Jennifer get out of her car, holding a bag with her examination tools. Rocky was sitting on the sofa, but when he heard the noise, he shot up, his head tilted toward the door. I went to open the door before Jennifer could ring the bell. She smiled at me, but the smile froze. But only 3 seconds later, Jennifer's scream tore through the quiet midday air. Rocky lunged at her face with both hands, his claws digging deep into her skin. Blood splattered onto the doorstep, the white wall, and even onto my shirt. Jennifer fell backward onto the ground, struggling to push Rocky away. But she couldn't stop the chimpanzee's strength, which was 5 times that of an adult human. His teeth bit into her cheek, ripping off a large chunk of flesh. Jennifer's cries grew fainter, turning into moans of pain. I stood frozen for a few more seconds. I saw every horrifying detail clearly. Jennifer's eyes looking at me full of despair, and Rocky's growl directed toward me. He was completely foreign. He wasn't the chimpanzee I had cared for over the past 14 years. Jennifer's next cry for help jolted me awake. I ran to the back of the house, grabbed the shovel next to the back door, rushed back out, and hit Rocky hard across the back. He only turned to look at me once before continuing to bite and tear at Jennifer. I dropped the shovel again and ran inside to call 911. When the woman's voice came through on the other end of the line, I immediately screamed. "He's eating my friend! Please, hurry up and get here!" "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" "He's eating my friend! Please, hurry up and get here!" About 10 minutes later, the sound of police sirens arrived. 2 police officers jumped out of the patrol car, drawing their guns when they saw the scene in front of them. Jennifer was lying motionless in a pool of blood. Rocky was still focused entirely on her. When he heard the footsteps, Rocky turned his head, his mouth still covered in blood. Then he suddenly charged straight toward them. I heard one officer yell, "Shoot him!" Immediately, 3 gunshots rang out in quick succession. Rocky still stumbled forward a few more feet before collapsing, convulsing a few times, and then lying still. When I turned back, Jennifer was being loaded into an ambulance. A few paramedics checked my health, and the police started questioning me. I sat on the porch steps, watching people cover Rocky's body with a blue tarp. The blood had dried on my hands. I didn't cry because my emotion then was just emptiness. It felt very similar to the feeling I had when I lost my husband and son. After I finished cooperating with the police investigation, the first thing I did was go to the hospital to see Jennifer. Jennifer survived, like a miracle, but her entire face was ruined. Seeing my best friend lying motionless, her head heavily bandaged, I almost fainted. 6 months passed. Jennifer has undergone 12 facial reconstruction surgeries. As for me, I have suffered from constant insomnia and severe depression. I completely fell apart from losing Rocky and feeling guilty about Jennifer. I was wrong to believe that I could love, care for, and change Rocky. That I could make Rocky a part of the family and make him forget his wild nature. But Rocky wasn't my child, and I didn't have the right to force him to live like a human. My biggest mistake wasn't raising Rocky, but forgetting that love can't change everything, especially instinct. If you are listening to my story and think that enough love is all it takes to erase the line between human and nature, please remember Jennifer. I regret and torment myself endlessly for what she had to endure, all because of my blindness.
My name is Doyle. When I was 10 years old, I had a very strange hobby. I loved wandering through the woods to find animal bones and bring them home to keep as treasures. My family lived in a neighborhood right on the edge of the forest. Behind our neighbor's house, there was a trail that led deep into the old-growth woods. Every kid in the area was strictly forbidden from going back there, but because of my obsession, I always found a way to sneak past the rules. I usually slipped away when my parents weren't paying attention. Once I successfully escaped into the woods, I would jump for joy and start my search. I could spend hours, or even a whole afternoon, with my head down, eyes scanning the ground, and hands constantly digging through the dirt. One afternoon, I prepared to head into the forest as usual. From the moment I stepped past the tree line behind the neighbor's house, I had an uneasy feeling I couldn't explain. But it was a perfect opportunity because my parents were going to be home late. Plus, my collection was almost complete, so I decided to push forward. The forest was incredibly quiet that day. There was no sun, so the scenery looked very gloomy. I thought about turning back, but then a small glint of light suddenly appeared between the trees. I was curious because I had never seen it before, and I subconsciously started to follow it. I went deep inside, deeper than I had ever gone before, until the light vanished. In front of me stood an old wooden cabin I had never seen. The roof was rotting, the windows were dark like empty eye sockets, and vines covered the walls. It looked exactly like a witch's house from the cartoons I used to watch. I felt a chill, but I was also excited, so I moved closer. Right next to the porch, I was drawn to a bunch of bones scattered on the ground. I assumed they were animal bones, so I knelt down to examine them. However, I quickly realized that some of the bones had unusual shapes. They were also quite large compared to the types I usually collected. I kept looking, thinking I might find a perfect piece to add to my collection. As I stepped forward, I saw a skull resting in a pile of decaying leaves. The black, hollow eye sockets were staring right at me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. But for a kid with such a weird hobby, I was pretty brave. I leaned in even closer to get a look, using my hand to brush away some leaves so I could see it clearly. When the skull was fully exposed, I saw that the jaw didn't look like any animal I owned, like a dog or a fox. And then, my heart hammered so hard it felt like it would explode out of my chest when I realized it was a human skull. I screamed and ran for my life. I crashed through thorn bushes, not daring to look back. Just as I was about to make it out of the woods, I suddenly saw a man standing right in the middle of the trail. He was very tall and thin, wearing a heavy coat even though the weather wasn't cold at all. What terrified me the most was his unblinking stare and a subtle, knowing smirk. I stopped a few yards away from him. Suddenly, he tilted his head, looked at me, and asked in a very low voice, "Did you find any bones?" That question made me freeze for a few seconds. I was stunned that he knew what I had been doing. I didn't answer. I just closed my eyes and bolted past him, heading straight for home. When I saw my parents, I immediately burst into tears and told them everything. After I described the location of the cabin, my father's expression completely changed. For the first time, I heard my parents talk about something the adults in the neighborhood had always kept secret from the children. 5 years earlier, a boy my age had gone missing after walking into those woods alone. The police searched for nearly a year but found nothing. After the incident, the boy's parents were so heartbroken that they moved away. The case had remained a mystery ever since. The police immediately cordoned off the forest for almost a week. My parents absolutely refused to tell me what they found inside that cabin. But from that day on, the trail behind the neighbor's house was fenced off, and I was permanently banned from going near those woods again. Whenever I remember it, the fear returns. I don't want to confirm the truth. But what makes me wake up gasping in the middle of the night is the memory of that man on the trail. That unblinking stare and the question about the bones. Was he the killer? And if he was, why was he still there after all those years? My name is Chris, and this is a story about something I saw with my own eyes 5 years ago. To this day, I still don't have the courage to open the photos I took that night. It was a solo camping trip over the weekend. I chose a remote forest located about a 2-hour drive from the nearest town. As I drove deeper into the woods, my cell phone signal disappeared completely. After setting up my tent by a creek, I grabbed my camera. I decided to hike deeper into the forest to catch some landscape shots at sunset. While following a strange, moss-covered trail, I suddenly spotted flickering lights in the distance. As I got closer, I discovered an old church sitting isolated in a large clearing. In front of the church, hundreds of people dressed in white were gathered in total silence around a tree. At first, I was just curious. I figured it was some kind of strange local religious ceremony, so I hid behind a large trunk to watch. But very quickly, my curiosity turned into pure horror. A thin man, with his hands and feet tightly bound, was kneeling at the base of the tree. A rope was looped around his neck and tossed over a high branch. 3 well-dressed men, who looked very different from the rest of the crowd, stepped forward. They began to pull the rope that hung over the branch. The man was instantly yanked upward, his feet dangling and kicking in midair. The surrounding crowd began to sing in unison. The man struggled violently and tried to scream for help, but the singing drowned him out. I felt like my legs were going to give out. I was all alone, and I knew I would be in grave danger if I confronted that many people. With no cell service, I couldn't call anyone for help. After only a few minutes, the man stopped moving completely. As soon as his limp body was lowered to the ground, the crowd began to cheer joyfully, as if they had just finished a sacred ritual. In total shock, I raised my camera and snapped a few photos for evidence. Then, I scrambled away in a daze. While trying to find my way back to camp, I accidentally circled around to the back of the church. I stumbled upon a field filled with wooden crosses packed tightly together. Many of the mounds of dirt were fresh and bright red, looking as if they had just been filled. At the edge of the field, I saw a child, about 10 years old, tied to a tree. I rushed over to untie the boy, but his reaction sent a chill down my spine. He wasn't scared, and he wasn't happy to see me. He looked at me with eyes that were completely hollow and soulless. When I urged him to run with me, he just shook his head. He spoke as calmly as if he were talking about a field trip. "I can't go yet. It's almost my turn. After the wedding day, we will all get to see God." I shuddered as I realized this child had been completely brainwashed. The wedding day ritual he mentioned was the horrific strangling I had just witnessed. As I tried to convince him one more time, a shout rang out behind me. 2 tall men in dark coats emerged from the shadows. They pointed directly at me and screamed. I tried to pull the boy with me to run, but he broke free and refused to follow. I had no choice. I had to run to save my own life. It was a true fight for survival. I tore through thorn bushes, feeling the sharp branches rip into my skin. The number of men in black chasing me grew. In my panic, I slipped and tumbled down a small slope, hitting a rock hard. I could barely stand up. However, the slope hid me from view, and the forest was thick and dark. I lay perfectly still as the men ran right past me without noticing. I had accidentally found the perfect hiding spot. Once I was sure they were gone, I crawled out and ran toward the main road near town before dawn. I immediately took all my photos and my story to the local police station. I thought I had uncovered a mass kidnapping and murder site, and I expected a large-scale rescue mission. But their reaction was confusing. They glanced at the photos, exchanged a knowing look with each other, and simply said they would send someone to check it out. A few days later, I was told that the leader of the group had been arrested, but was quickly released due to insufficient evidence. I tried to explain about the strangled man and the tied-up child, but the police claimed it could have been a voluntary religious ritual. They said my photos weren't clear enough to prove anything. I was stunned and felt completely helpless against their ridiculous excuses and lazy investigation. A few days later, while I was still reeling from the shock, I received an anonymous text. "Stop digging if you want to stay safe." That was when I understood. The leader's release wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. It gave him time to go back and scrub the evidence now that I had exposed the location. Perhaps those well-dressed men pulling the rope had much deeper connections than just some forest cult. For the past 5 years, I had been haunted by that child's hollow eyes. I watched a crime happen right in front of me, but in the end, I couldn't save anyone. I might have even accidentally helped the killers cover their tracks. I still have those photos on an old hard drive, but I have never dared to look at them again. The story is inspired by a real-life case. The Shakahola cult, led by Paul Mackenzie, is considered one of Kenya's most horrific tragedies. Initially, Mackenzie lured hundreds of followers with staged miracle cures, then brainwashed them into believing the apocalypse was coming and that modern society was a tool of evil. He forced followers to sell all their possessions and move to an isolated 800-acre forest. There, Mackenzie ordered followers to starve to death to meet God, with children dying first. When many no longer wanted to die, he created a wedding day ritual where guards directly strangled or beat victims to death amidst the cheers of the crowd. By 2024, authorities had unearthed more than 450 bodies, many victims showing signs of organ harvesting. Mackenzie and dozens of accomplices are currently being prosecuted for murder, terrorism, and child torture. I accidentally saved the monster on a snowy night. I have lived alone in a log cabin deep in the woods of Montana for nearly 15 years. It was the most violent blizzard I had seen in all my years in the forest. In the middle of the night, while I was reinforcing the cabin door, I heard a frantic knocking and the sound of someone moaning. When I opened the door, I was shocked to see a young man in terrible shape, nearly frozen to death. He was shaking uncontrollably in tattered clothes, and his face was as white as a sheet. He kept whispering, begging me to let him stay for just one night. Seeing him like that, I couldn't turn him away. I threw more wood into the fireplace, grabbed a blanket, and made him a hot pot of tea. After he calmed down a bit, he thanked me, though his voice was still trembling. It was clear he had been through something absolutely horrific. I checked on him and learned his name was Philip. He said he had been on a hiking trip with his girlfriend, Mia, to propose to her. Hearing this made me suspicious. This time of year was a terrible time for a long hike. Philip started telling his story through choked sobs, claiming they were attacked by wild animals. He said he had to watch Mia being torn apart right in front of his eyes, unable to do anything to help. He sat huddled by the fire, muttering about the gruesome scene like someone on the verge of a mental breakdown. I tried to comfort Philip and asked for the exact location of the attack. I know this terrain like the back of my hand and trust my survival skills. I thought maybe there was still hope for Mia, or at least I could bring back whatever was left of her. But Philip didn't answer. He just kept crying and calling out his girlfriend's name. I figured he was too traumatized to talk, so I stopped pushing and went to cook him a bowl of soup. As I brought the soup out, the storm outside reached its peak. The wind was so strong that falling branches slammed against the cabin's tin roof with a loud roar. I quickly went around the house to make sure everything was secure, but when I walked back into the living room, the atmosphere had turned bone-chilling. Philip wasn't crying anymore. He wasn't shaking or huddling either. He was sitting straight up in the chair with an eerily calm expression, his sharp eyes staring directly at me. A remote location, extreme weather, plus the hungry animals out there, Philip repeated slowly, looking out the window. There was something in his tone that made my blood run cold. Then, Philip gave a slight smile. It's the perfect way to make sure nobody ever finds anything. I froze. The bowl of soup in my hand nearly slipped to the floor. Philip looked up at me, and his eyes were now the eyes of a predator enjoying his prize. Philip began to speak in a flat, calm voice about how he had lured Mia into an area with animal tracks. He described watching her panic and run into the blizzard, and how the forest quickly swallowed her screams. He wasn't a victim. He was a killer who was proud of his crime. He burst into a delighted laugh that echoed throughout the cabin. In that moment, I realized I had invited a demon into my home. I stayed as calm as I could, trying not to draw his attention as I backed up toward the wall near the dining table. My hunting shotgun was hanging right there, but Philip was faster than I expected. The moment my hand touched the gun, he pulled a folding knife from his jacket and lunged at me like a rabid animal. Everything happened in a flash. We wrestled in the middle of the cramped cabin. I realized he was much stronger than he looked, and every strike he threw was aimed to kill. The sharp blade kept grazing my face.
I managed to point the barrel at him, but in a split second of hesitation because I didn't want to become a killer myself, Philip lunged and knocked the gun aside. Immediately after, he buried the blade deep into my shoulder. Philip laughed with excitement when he heard me scream in pain. His overconfidence gave me one last chance. I pushed through the pain, used every bit of my strength to kick him hard in the stomach, and scrambled for the gun. Philip lunged again, but this time, I was faster. As soon as I grabbed the shotgun, I aimed at his legs and pulled the trigger repeatedly. But instead of screaming in agony, he just looked down at his wounds and started laughing like a complete madman. I quickly tied him up and secured him to the window bars. Since there was no cell service to call the police, I had to guard this wild animal all through the night and until the next afternoon. The ordeal ended when I handed Philip over to the police and gave them all the information about the girl named Mia. According to what I learned later, the police found traces of the crime. Mia was real, but all that remained of the poor girl were 2 fingers and a single shoe buried in the snow. She had been consumed by wild animals, exactly as his cruel plan intended. Ever since that night with Philip, if a man knocks on my door, I refuse to open it. I thought I had lived in the woods long enough to know what was dangerous, until I opened the door and let Philip inside.
My name is Hal, and I am 30 years old. My girlfriend Emily and I are both freelancers. Our lives are never rooted in one place. We live full-time in our van with our 2 dogs, working and traveling across the United States. But sometimes, that freedom comes with risks I never truly expected. I will never forget the fateful day of January 24th, 2023. That day, we were camping in a very remote area in Texas. From early morning, the sky looked gloomy with heavy gray clouds. We turned on our NOAA weather radio to keep track of the situation. At first, we thought it would just be a normal thunderstorm, maybe a bit loud, but it would pass. But the air inside the van suddenly felt suffocating when the radio announced, "Tornado confirmed in the orange sector." Emily looked at me, startled. She rushed to check the weather radar on her phone and gasped, "How? We are right in the middle of that orange zone." I looked at her, worried and speechless. An orange zone meant high danger. A tornado was very likely to hit. We started discussing a plan to move, but everything happened too fast. The wind began to howl, and rain poured down like a waterfall, slamming against the sides of the van. Emily completely panicked. She kept asking me, "Where do we go? What do we do? I can't stay calm, Hal." Because Emily was so upset, I had to force myself to stay level-headed, even though I was just as terrified inside. Our two dogs huddled in the corner of the van. They could sense the tension and the danger in the air. I quickly assessed the situation. The only road out of the area was already blocked by fallen trees and flying debris. Initially, we decided to hunker down inside the van, hoping it would be strong enough to protect us. I pulled Emily close, trying to reassure her that everything would be okay. But that tiny bit of hope was cruelly crushed. The radio blared an emergency alert. "A large and extremely dangerous tornado has been located in the area. Complete destruction is possible. Take cover immediately." The phrase, "complete destruction," echoed in my head like a death sentence. Suddenly, the van didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a thin tin can waiting to be crushed. Emily began to sob, clutching me and the two dogs as if it were the last time. Then, the peak of the horror arrived. A strange sound came from the distance. At first, it was a low rumble on the horizon, but within seconds, it amplified into an earth-shattering roar. "What is that? Is that a train?" Emily screamed through her tears. The roar sounded like dozens of freight trains charging toward us at a terrifying speed. I realized that was the freight train sound people always use to describe a tornado. It was headed straight for us. The van began to shake violently against the force of the wind. Everything inside flipped over, shattering across the floor. I could feel the van being lifted, tilting to one side. In a split second, I realized staying in the car was suicide. The van would be tossed like a dry leaf, and we would die inside it. "Move! Get out now! To the back!" I yelled. Pure instinct took over. I threw open the back doors of the van. The wind immediately rushed in, blowing our belongings out into the storm. We grabbed the dogs and leaped out of the van into a storm that was tearing the sky apart. About 10 yards away, there was a shallow drainage ditch filled with swirling mud and murky water. We dove into it. I pushed Emily and the dogs flat against the bottom of the ditch and used my own body to shield them. In that moment, I heard the sound of metal being torn apart right above my head. The screaming wind wasn't just wind anymore. It was the roar of a monster swallowing everything in its path. Dirt, rocks, branches, and pieces of our van flew over us. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the freezing, muddy water soak into my skin, silently praying for a miracle. "You're going to be okay, I promise. We're going to make it," I whispered in her ear. It felt like it lasted forever, but in reality, it was probably only 5 to 7 minutes. The eye of the tornado passed, the train sound faded away, and all that was left was heavy rain and the haunting silence of a battlefield. When we slowly lifted our heads from the mud, the landscape was completely unrecognizable. Our van was flipped on its side, twisted like a piece of crumpled paper. Nearby storage buildings had been leveled into piles of brick and scrap. But somehow, we were still there. Emily, the dogs, and I, all of us were soaked, shivering, and covered in mud, but no one was seriously hurt. We held each other tight in the middle of the wreckage, crying tears of joy because we were alive. The decision to leave the van at the last second saved our lives. If we had stayed inside for one more minute, the outcome would have been unthinkable. In that life or death moment, love and survival instinct led us to make the right choice.
This story happened in the summer of 2011, when I was only 14 years old. To give you a better picture, my family owned a remote piece of land in western Maryland. It was private property deep in the mountains, where almost everyone living nearby was related to my family in one way or another. I grew up there running around with my cousins, and I always believed it was the safest place in the world. But a fateful day by the savage river shattered that innocent belief forever. It was a sweltering summer afternoon. My cousin, who was 1 year older than me, and I decided to go for a walk along the rugged dirt path that follows the rushing savage river. My cousin was a little junior entomologist, so he spent the whole time with his eyes glued to the ground, looking for bugs or crawfish. I just strolled along beside him, enjoying the sound of the water hitting the rocks. Everything seemed normal until I heard a very distinct sound. A sharp click echoed through the quiet air. It wasn't a branch snapping, and it wasn't the sound of stones hitting each other. I whipped my head toward the opposite bank of the river. Not even 15 feet away, a stranger had just stepped out from the thick brush. He was wearing a black jacket and holding a camera that was still pointed directly at me. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I saw his large frame and felt a terrifying certainty that he was staring right at me. Then, he smiled. I knew he was smiling because I could see his teeth clearly. His shoulders shook slightly, and a low, muffled laugh drifted across the water. Before I could even react, I heard another click. He took a second photo. I flinched and stepped back, but I froze. Then, he lowered his camera, kept that same smile on his face, and slowly wagged his index finger back and forth. The gesture was unmistakable, exactly like the way an adult wags their finger when scolding a child for doing something wrong. I didn't know what that signal meant, but my heart started racing. Next, he pointed down at his side. I followed his hand and saw a knife sheath attached to his belt. Then, he brought his hand up to his throat and slowly, deliberately, drew his finger across it in a slit-throat motion. In that moment, my mind went completely blank. I couldn't think of anything specific. I only had one reflex. I lunged over, grabbed my cousin's arm, and screamed, "Run! Run now!" As soon as we turned to bolt, I heard a third click behind us, followed immediately by the sound of water splashing. Splash, splash! He was wading through the river, coming after us. I sprinted for my life through the dense bushes, my heart pounding like it wanted to jump out of my chest. The path back home was full of rocks and slippery roots. In my total panic, I tripped over a dry branch and fell face first into the dirt. I hit the ground so hard that I could taste the thick, metallic flavor of blood in my mouth. I had bitten through my lip. My knees and hands were stinging, but my fear was 1,000 times stronger than the pain. I wasn't on the ground for even 3 seconds before I scrambled back up, pulling my cousin along as we kept flying. I swear I could hear branches snapping right behind me. When the campsite finally appeared ahead, my legs were nearly numb. My breath was ragged, my throat was bone dry, and my lip was swelling up from the cut. I ran straight into the middle of the adults and told them everything. I described his throat slit gesture in detail, using both my words and my hands. My grandfather didn't ask many questions. He and a few other men in the family grabbed their rifles and headed toward the river path. The atmosphere turned incredibly tense. They searched for 2 hours. When they came back, they shook their heads and said no one was there. They found no suspicious signs at all. When my mother heard this, she sighed. She looked at me with a stern expression and said I was probably just panicking and letting my imagination run wild. "Look at how you've hurt yourself just being so worked up," she said. Of course, I argued back immediately. I tried to explain that I fell because I was running for my life, but she wouldn't change her mind. I turned to my cousin, hoping he would confirm what we saw, but he just looked at everyone and then at me with a confused expression. He scratched his head and said he only ran because he saw me running, but he didn't notice anything else. He hadn't looked at the riverbank, and he didn't hear the camera because he was too busy looking for bugs. That was the moment I learned what it felt like to be completely alone. I stood there under the skeptical eyes of my family, feeling a horrible sense of helplessness. The thing I wanted to do most right then was kick my cousin. 15 years have passed, but I still remember every detail of that man's appearance and his gestures. I always think about those photos he took. I wonder where they are now. Am I sitting in some collection somewhere, captured in a moment of pure terror? I still go back to that campsite with my family every year, but I don't feel comfortable there anymore. I'm always on guard. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted. The only thing I'm certain of is that it happened. It was real. I still have a small scar on my lip as a reminder that this memory wasn't just a figment of my imagination.
I'm Nicole, 26, and I love life on the road. I converted an old Ford Transit van into a fully equipped mobile home. I came to the mountains of Montana in early winter. That night was December 17th, and the temperature dropped lower than expected. Even in the wilderness, I'd never felt lonely or scared until that night. I fell into a deep sleep, curled up in my thick sleeping bag, feeling safe in my little van. I jolted awake. My phone showed 4:27 a.m. Maybe it was just a tree branch blown against the van by the wind. The sound came again, and it wasn't a branch. My mind told me it might just be a hiker needing help, but no one hikes at 4 a.m. in such heavy snow. I reached for my phone, trembling as I turned on the video recording app. "I know you're in there. I've been watching you." A deep male voice echoed. My throat tightened. I tried to keep my phone steady. "I don't know you. What do you want?" I crawled towards the driver's seat, careful not to make a sound. Through the windshield, I saw a car parked far away, its headlights blazing. "I like the color of the underwear you're wearing." He sounded amused. My heart stopped. How long had he been watching me? "I've called the police. They're on their way." A raspy laugh replied. "There's no cell service here, Lisa. You checked when you arrived, remember? You even complained about it. A pretty car like this must have a lot of doors. I wonder if you've locked them all." I swallowed hard. The passenger window. It wasn't secure, and I hadn't had time to fix it. My survival instinct kicked in. I lunged for the driver's seat. The keys were already in the ignition. The engine roared to life in the dark. The van lurched forward, almost sliding off the unpaved road. In the rearview mirror, I saw the black car also start to move, its headlights aimed directly at my van. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, speed rocketing to 55 miles per hour on the slippery forest road. The snow fell heavier, visibility reduced to just a few feet in front of me. The other car closed in, less than 15 feet from my tail. I could see the outlines of two men behind the wheel. The road suddenly curved. Instead of slowing down, I tightened my grip on the wheel and took a risk. I knew a small path that continued along the hillside. As I reached the bend, I suddenly pulled the handbrake, sharply turned the wheel, and swerved the van onto the narrow path to the right. The van tilted but held on. The car behind couldn't react in time to the maneuver. It sped straight down the main road, tires screeching in the dark as they realized they'd lost me. I turned off my lights, letting the van slowly coast down the path. After a few minutes, I stopped beside a large rock, hiding the van from the main road. The receding engine sound indicated they had gone in the other direction. All night, I sat leaning against the door, my heart rate unable to return to normal. As soon as dawn broke, I drove to the nearest town's police station. I reported everything. The officer listened, his expression growing more concerned. "I need to tell you something." The officer sighed. "This isn't the first report we've received. In the past 6 months, 3 other women have reported similar experiences when alone at night. What happened to them? 2 of them disappeared 2 weeks later. The third was found, but I don't want to go into detail. So, there's a predator targeting women? Not one. I think they operate as a group." I returned to my van. The sense of safety it once provided was completely gone. I decided to drive home to my parents in Ohio and sell the van. On the way, I stopped in a small town to stay overnight at a hotel. As I walked into the hotel room and locked the door, the images of that terrifying experience kept replaying in my mind. I opened my phone to rewatch the video I had recorded. Maybe I would see something I had missed. With trembling hands, I opened the video file. The screen was pitch black, but the audio was clearly recorded.
Lisa.
I replayed that part. The man had called me Lisa, but my name is Nicole. I quickly opened my Instagram app, searching for the name Lisa, along with the keywords van life and Montana. After a few minutes of scrolling, my heart nearly stopped. A young woman named Lisa Wilson, with reddish-brown hair like mine, also lived in a van and had come to Montana 2 months ago. As I looked deeper into her pictures, I noticed many astonishing similarities. Not just the hair color, but also her hairstyle, clothing style, and even how she decorated her van. I scrolled down to Lisa's older posts. She bought her van from the same dealership in Seattle where I bought mine. The Ford Transit model is very popular in the van life community, and metallic silver paint is also a common choice. I scrolled further and discovered that Lisa had worked for the same travel magazine I had contributed to. I believed that if anyone followed both of us on social media, they could easily mistake us for each other. I rushed to my camera bag and pulled out an old memory card I hadn't deleted. There was a photo of a sunrise near the campground, and in the distance, I saw a Ford Transit van identical to mine. My hands trembled as I realized the truth. They mistook me for Lisa. Immediately, I called the police officer who took my report. The police asked me to bring the van to the station for a thorough inspection. My Ford Transit wasn't Lisa's van, but they were almost identical. More importantly, through GPS and gas station data, the police discovered that both Lisa and I had traveled similar routes within the past 2 months. 2 weeks later, I heard that the FBI had arrested 4 suspects at a secluded farm more than 60 miles from me. They found evidence linking them to at least 7 other disappearances in Montana and other states. This network had been operating for years, targeting people living on the road because they had less social contact. Lisa Wilson was not found alive. 6 months later, I'm still trying to rebuild my life in a small apartment in Columbus. I no longer live on the road, but I've never given up on my dream of freedom and exploration. Instead, I'm writing a book about women's safety. In my photography notebook, I still keep a picture of Lisa, the stranger whose life became intertwined with mine by chance. It was a cold, rainy night. It was around 2 a.m., and the temperature outside was about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. We had just left a fun party and were driving home. We were on a desolate, dark road that runs alongside the Rogue River in Belmont, Michigan. Suddenly, my friend who was driving gasped and stared straight ahead. My friend in the back seat and I quickly looked too, and we saw it. A figure was crawling on the pavement ahead, inching forward. "Is that a person or an animal?" I asked, my voice shaking. We drove closer. My friend at the wheel didn't slow down, but quickly swerved to avoid the thing. Our headlights illuminated it in a flash, and we zipped past. It looked like a woman, her hair matted and covering her face. Her clothes were soaked, and she was crawling in a bizarre way. She looked like a giant spider scuttling across the asphalt. No one spoke for a few seconds. All we heard was the car's engine and our own heavy breathing. After a quick argument, we turned the car around. Our main feeling wasn't curiosity. It was that our conscience wouldn't let us abandon someone in that kind of situation. When we came back, we saw her more clearly. It was a young woman, maybe in her 20s. She was hunched in the middle of the road in an unnatural crouch. Her knees were pressed together, her feet splayed out, and her body was bent forward. Her head was slowly swaying back and forth. We stopped the car a few yards from her. I stared, trying to analyze what was happening. Suddenly, she raised one hand and moved it up and down rhythmically. Then she abruptly stopped. A few seconds later, she started beating her head repeatedly with her hand. We could clearly hear the thud even inside the car. We were all startled by the woman's action. What truly sent a chill down our spines was her expression. In the headlights, we could see her eyes were abnormally wide open, but they weren't focused on anything specific. Her mouth was agape, but no sound came out. Her hair was drenched and stuck to her cheeks and neck. In that cold, there was no way a conscious person would be in that state. We decided to back up a little to observe from a safer distance. Then she started to laugh. It sounded like a terrifying mixture of a cough and a moan, echoing in the empty space. My friend in the back screamed, "Drive! Drive now!" But the driver didn't react. I couldn't take my eyes off the woman either. She stopped laughing and started crawling toward us. She maintained that bizarre posture, arms and legs straight, head low to the ground, yet her face remained fixed on us. The distance between us shrank. I could hear her raspy breathing. My friend quickly slammed the car into reverse. The tires squealed and we backed up about 30 feet, but the woman didn't stop. She kept crawling toward us, one movement after another, maintaining her pace. Then she suddenly froze, completely motionless like a statue. We stopped the car, watching for a moment longer. We all held our breath, not daring to move. Then, as if someone had flipped a power switch, the woman collapsed straight down onto the road. Her body hit the pavement with a heavy thud. Immediately following was the loud impact of her head hitting the road. I winced, imagining how much that must have hurt. I quickly grabbed my phone and called 911, trying to describe what we had just witnessed. But I struggled with the words. She was crawling weirdly. She was hitting her own head, then laughing, and now she's lying still. The dispatcher tried to calm me down, telling us to stay in the car and wait. While waiting, I couldn't take my eyes off the figure lying on the road. About 10 minutes later, the police and an ambulance arrived. Paramedics rushed over to check the girl's vital signs. I saw them talking urgently to each other, and they quickly placed her on a stretcher. As they lifted her, I caught one last glimpse of her face. Her eyes were still wide but unfocused. A police officer came over to get information from us. My brain was trying to process everything we had just seen. We were allowed to leave after about 20 minutes of talking with the police. A few hours later, after it was light out, I drove back to the scene alone. What I noticed was some freshly disturbed dirt along the riverbank near the road. This suggested that she had most likely fallen into the Rogue River and struggled to swim onto the road just minutes before our car passed. Over the next few days, the story slowly came together. The woman was named Angela, 28, a student attending Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, over 200 miles away. She had been reported missing 2 days before we encountered her. Angela's friend said that before she disappeared, she constantly talked about feeling like someone was following her. She was always in a state of high stress and on edge. When she finally woke up in the hospital, doctors explained that Angela had experienced a state of dissociative fugue. This is the brain's defense mechanism when a person faces levels of stress and fear that exceed their coping ability. The brain, unable to process the continuous horror, chooses to disconnect from reality. In this state, patients completely forget their identity. They don't know where they are or what they're doing. They can perform complex actions, like driving a car, but have no conscious awareness of those actions. Some studies suggest that patients in this state may experience hallucinations, hearing voices, or seeing images that don't exist, and acting on invisible commands. The brain creates an alternative reality to avoid confronting the true fear. Angela had been living in that alternative reality for 2 days. She drove aimlessly, without eating or sleeping. Then somehow, she ended up in the Rogue River. The shock of the freezing water must have roused a part of her consciousness enough for her to crawl onto the road, but not enough to fully regain awareness. I still clearly remember Angela's vacant eyes and her strange actions. What exactly had she gone through for her brain to simply stop processing? Angela physically recovered, but she remembers nothing about those 2 days. She went to sleep on a Friday night and woke up in the hospital on a Monday, completely bewildered. I still occasionally drive past that stretch of road at night. I wonder if there is anyone else wandering out there, someone trapped in a fuzzy world, no longer themselves. Have any of you ever experienced or known someone with dissociative fugue? If so, please share your story below. Perhaps your story will help others recognize the warning signs before it's too late. For 10 long years, the 3 women lived under strict control, completely isolated from the outside world. Despite the unimaginable conditions, they never lost hope for freedom. That resilience was eventually rewarded when one of them found a chance to call for help from a neighbor, an act that led to their rescue. The case was soon brought to light, and the perpetrator received a harsh sentence, putting an end to a dark chapter in the victims' lives. Yet what is even more admirable is that these 3 women chose to move forward, rising above their past and becoming symbols of resilience, an inspiration to millions around the world.
Mm-hmm.